Hello, everyone. Just a quick note before the episode. I tried to balance the audio out a bit, but the audio in the first hour is kind of not great. Um, we were talking for about an hour, which I was recording, but I record everything kind of what we say in here, and we were talking for about an hour before we realized that this is what we were talking about for the episode, and then we actually. Tried to implement some microphone discipline. So apologies for the first hour crappy audio. It should be understandable, but it's just not as good as when we're doing it properly. Hopefully you enjoy the episode. It's another long one. We got to be more disciplined and get some subjects that we can talk about for an hour and a half instead of 3 hours. All right. Thanks.
I like Australia's political system. How it kind of
how's it different? Like, I know they keep talking about going Republican, but
they call it Westminster.
Okay.
Where they kind of took a blend of the Westminster system, but with the checks and balances of the American system.
Yeah.
I don't know a lot about it, but I like the idea of it. I think it's a great idea to fuse two effective systems.
I would do that. Too, I was been thinking about this a lot as well. Just like you could make the Canadian system appear on the surface to be very similar to what it is now, but really make it a lot more. Like basically by not changing anybody's name, but changing their powers, rearranging their powers, right? Mm-hmm. So if you divorce the executive power or the executive separated right out of the legislature, right? The governor general becomes elected and he's the president. Maybe we just keep the title governor general because why not?
Yeah.
Then the Senate becomes. If I was doing it, I would make the Senate obviously become effective, but I would make senators are appointed by method to be determined by the provinces, and I guess the territories too, and each one I guess would have 5.
So not triple E.
Well, it could be if the province decide they wanted to elect their senators, and that could be. But I am more amenable to the old American system where they were appointed by the government, right? Like so, indirect democracy, right? Because the person who appoints them is democratically elected.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Right, and then
the province choose.
Yeah, the province, and so the province wants to have elect their senators, or they want to appoint their senators. That's up to them.
Like a place like Alberta, will probably want to elect a senator.
Sure.
A place like BC would probably want.
Okay. But how many seats?
But the senator is beholden to the province,
right?
Not the prime minister or the president or the governor general or whatever, right?
Because right now it seems to me it's always been an arbitrary number that if a government wants to pass things in the upper house, they just appoint a whole bunch of new senators, right?
Yeah. So we're talking.
Age out.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm not just talking about.
Number.
I'm not just. Is it a fixed number? I thought they just kept appointing.
And also, I would.
No, there's always a given number of vacancies.
I think you would also probably at least term limit the Senate, term limit the governor general under this system, right? So like maybe 12 years. So two terms for senators, say 12 years. Just using like the American.
If you got a majority in the Senate or a passive Senate, it's in the interest of the sitting Parliament. Leave the vacancies until you really need them. Let's say you've got legislation that's really important to you.
Yeah.
And you know it could be controversial. And you want it said and done and in effect. Yeah. You don't want it on the public eye for a whole lot of time. Save your vacancies.
And then just
if I know
that's when you need it with people you know are going to pass it.
Right. Okay. So before I introduce that legislation in the fall session, I fill up all the vacancies I can in the spring. So then I load it with my partisans, then I'll introduce legislation. Leave them all vacant until I need them.
What's the makeup of this? It seems to me it's just, okay, there's X number of seats. Sounds like it never changes the number of seats.
No, it doesn't.
But there isn't regional representation on there.
Well,
So
it
you're
is by
saying-
province. It is by province.
Is it by problem?
Yep, but it's done the same way as the Commons, that Quebec and Ontario have the most Senate seats. Alberta has some like 6. The Prairie Province is like 6. Quebec and Ontario each have like 24.
Yeah.
But, and it's the Prime Minister and Cabinet who are appointing new senators at any given time?
Yep, and they serve for life.
They serve for life.
Yeah.
I mean, Governor General-
Until they voluntarily step down.
Governor General having a term limit on Governor General was an interesting concept. Probably good to have a lot-
I'm talking about a governor general with executive authority,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
And that's elected.
Even then, even with our current Governor General, I would like to see it a longer term.
Yeah, because they seem to rotate through them.
Yeah.
In my lifetime.
Too quick.
Like, it's
Yeah,
just like
yeah.
boom, 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 boom. Right?
Like, I have read,
Yeah, I think a governor generals typically will do like 2 parliamentary terms and then gone or something like that.
Yeah.
Regardless if the government does
and
3.
like, with the
if
passing,
that.
of the Queen, remember hearing an interview with, I think it was, Brown? Cameron. And there was another former PM in there as well. Like, they found the comments from Margaret Thatcher.
Right.
So both Cameron and Thatcher, who were prime ministers in very different ages, both said that they really appreciated their audiences with the Queen because she had such a long-term view.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She had been such a presence over, so she had been involved in government for decades. So she had a really unique perspective.
Absolutely.
And they both really appreciated having access to that. So I thought, you know what? Maybe our Governor General should serve for like 24 years. Even in his current role.
Yeah.
Just to have someone with consistency. Who is there? Parliaments come, parliaments go.
But then you want
But
the
have that one
But
common
it depends
figure
on the
who's
role, because it sounds like you're talking about adapting the role.
Yeah.
I heard
yeah.
you say-
Basically, I'm converting our somewhat Westminster-based system into the American system, but not changing the names.
So I heard the
Divisions
name.
should
I
be
heard
that.
the title of president. Sorry.
there.
But I assume you kind of mean president in the secondary way that
Well, let's say the
the
European
president
sense.
or president of Israel. So the prime minister
Yeah.
of Israel is the more
Head of
powerful
the
of the
executive.
two,
Yeah.
right?
No, see,
but
but
the president
my
fulfills a function.
my idea is to
Oh, like
is
the
to
president of Germany.
my idea is to remove the executive functions from the House of Commons and move it to the Governor General. The Governor General being the chief executive, who is elected, and then they appoint their own executive, and then the civil service
Their
works for
own
that.
cabinet.
Well,
Yeah, their cabinet, yeah,
isn't there a differentiation?
and that's basically the American system.
I mean, there is a separation of a sort between the PM as executive and the House of Commons, which is legislative. The PM just happens to be a member of Parliament as well.
Yeah, but so are all the
Yeah.
ministers, right?
The executive
Yeah.
are all
Right.
elected members.
But they don't have to be. They don't have to
No,
be.
I suppose they don't. They do not have to be.
When Ignatieff was first
Yeah.
brought in, and I think this was prior to him being leader. Wasn't he before he was leader? Wasn't he appointed a cabinet post and he hadn't even been elected?
Well, it was before he sat in the House.
Might
It
have
might have been, yeah. That sounds familiar.
It's been done. It's been done many times.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Like
And they have to be in the Commons for question period. So they can be, as any minister of the Crown, must be available for questioning.
at
But
any
when the
time.
vote comes, they must leave. They're not allowed to be in the House during the vote.
For ministers who aren't MPs.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I like the idea of a Triple E Senate. Although I like your idea.
I'm more of
Of let the province choose what it wants to do.
yeah. See, and I'm a big believer that properly functioning democracies have anti-democratic elements in them, right? And for the United States, that anti-democratic element is the Supreme Court, and to an extent the Senate, because the Senate gives each state a vote regardless of their population, the same vote regardless of their population.
One just is rep by region, not rep by pot.
Yeah.
And that's what I think the Senate should be, to balance the House of Commons. Because the Commons is rep by population,
Yeah.
so the Senate should be rep by region
Yeah.
to balance that.
Yeah.
Because again, a democracy must have respect for minority rights.
Exactly. And the current system doesn't have that.
Right. So as you say, yeah, all functioning democracies must have checks and balances.
Yeah.
Right? And so I like that. I like that idea about a Triple A Senate.
Yeah.
I would also want the Senate to be staggered, so that it's never.
The way the American one is?
Yeah, kind of like where they have a midterm.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Where we have the Commons, and then 2 years later you have your Senate elections.
Yeah.
So that way.
Well, but the American system is a third of the Senate every 2 years.
Yes.
Right? So they get elected 6-year terms.
Which
But
I
the
also
House,
like.
the House is all 2 years.
2-year terms, yeah.
When was that limitation, or not limitation, but when was that standard put in place? Was that from the beginning, from
I think it was off the hop, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because I try to envision, like, okay, that's great when you've got 13 colonies and the population that you do.
It's
Now
a
that
little
you've got
insane. It
50
makes American
states-
politics a little crazy.
2 years is too short a term.
Yeah, because they're immediately back into politics.
Yeah. Well, basically, there's a year to do stuff and then a year to get it reelected.
Yeah.
And all their time is spent fundraising,
Yeah.
right? And most of the legislative initiatives come from the staff, not from the politician, because the
Yeah.
politicians are too busy fundraising.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
Yeah,
got a lot
I
of
think
problems.
2
I would
years
do.
is too short. Well, I like the idea of rotating so that you don't get a massive turnover all at once.
Yeah.
Where I like the idea of a 6-year term
Mm-hmm.
with a third up for election each time.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that very much.
You okay if I grab one more?
No, go ahead.
Yeah.
It's fine if there's no levels.
And that way you will have an effective opposition to the Commons. Because right now, our opposition really doesn't have any ability to stop the government.
Never have.
No, it never has. Never
No,
has.
there is no mechanism if the government's got a
The government has majority. It's a 4-year tyranny.
It is. It's
Yeah.
the polite dictatorship, right? That's
Yeah.
what they call it.
I've never, it just puts too much power
In the PMO.
in the hands of the government.
Mm-hmm.
There's no external balance.
And that's the flaw of the Westminster system, because that doesn't.
Yes.
And the flip side to the same system.
Now,
is-
the House of Lords, are they like our Senate? Are they like nutless, or
They are nutless, yes.
they just make a lot of noise?
Yeah, in that respect.
And just that they're appointed permanent.
No.
Or, yeah.
No, well, because
Yeah.
they're
Yeah,
hereditary.
yeah, same thing.
They're hereditary. So.
Yeah, same. Yeah, hereditary. Sorry, you can be appointed to
Mhm.
the House, like Daniel Hannan was just appointed to the House.
Right.
But yeah, for the most part, although they are phasing out the hereditary lords,
Uh-huh.
they are phasing those out, so that like once, yeah, there's going to be fewer and fewer and fewer. I don't know the mechanism by which they're doing it. There's fewer and fewer.
Well, what they
fewer
replace it with.
You're appointed. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's more and more like the Senate.
That makes sense. I think that's one aspect of the death of the Queen. That is.
It's just a modern age.
Yeah.
You know?
So, but I mean, because she's been around so long, she came in 52.
Yeah.
You know, things were still.
Yeah. Well,
Fairly
they've been
first-
doing this for like 30 years, phasing out the hereditary lords. Like this is a long-term program that they're on.
I think there's a lot of soul searching going on. Sorry, I interrupt you again. You finish your thought.
They are gradually, on the road to making it more like the Senate. It's easy to defend a hereditary monarch. That's easy to defend in terms of political like efficacy.
Mm-hmm.
Much harder to defend a hereditary aristocracy
Yeah.
involved in politics. Way harder to defend.
Well, I think what's changed now is because the Queen was an institution, right? And now, with the death of King Charles, so much has changed. Now,
The death of King Charles. You're looking a little ahead of yourself.
sorry, no,
Or, yeah,
sorry, with
Of the Queen.
The ascension.
the death of the Queen, the ascension of the King. Now everyone kind of goes, okay, now we can take a serious look at the monarchy, and then to your point, we can really seriously look at the nobility. 'Cause the nobility thing was already kind
hard
of
to defend.
an antiquated concept,
Yeah,
and now
it's hard to argue for that.
yeah.
Like, what benefit does it serve? You know? It's really hard to, like, it's very, very hard to make an argument that a hereditary lordship is going to be more effective than an appointee of an accomplished member of the community.
Well, and
Very hard.
Here's what I find weird about you saying that. Because, okay, now we're going to make it more like the Senate. I'm like, well, the Senate's already useless.
Yes,
it's just a rubber stamp. So,
Yep.
Not calling it the House of Lords anymore,
Yep.
because it's not full of lords, isn't
Well,
going to change the...
you create a lordship.
Yeah,
You create,
under a
it's
different
just
name,
it's just a title.
right? Yeah, that's what I think...
I mean,
I've never understood the purpose of the Senate. Like,
It's
it's
not-
such a rubber stamp.
it's not completely useless.
It's
And
it slows shit down.
Yeah, and they are the chamber of sober second thought.
Yeah, but when has it, I mean, I think maybe twice in my lifetime do I remember even something resembling that sober second thought being undertaken.
There was some actually decent debate in the Senate.
Yeah, it happens from time to time.
Some decent debate in the Senate over C11. They didn't stop it, unfortunately, but there's
But
a lot of liberals who were not for it.
there's some good debate on it.
Yeah,
And they're another form of Her Majesty's loyal opposition.
yeah,
In that, with good debate, good ideas can come forth, and then this can spread into the public sphere.
yeah.
If good points are brought forward, and then public opinion
Yeah.
becomes aroused, and of course the Senate can send it back with amendments, and it must go through committee again.
Yeah.
And then the opposition can say, hey, these are good points, we haven't thought about that, and really hammer on that in question period, raise media awareness, public opinion. So it's an augment to the,
C11's a goddamn
to the-
disaster, but
This is the gun control, right?
no,
no,
that's
this
the
is
internet censorship.
the internet censorship bill.
Oh, okay.
This is the
That
George
puts-
Orwell bill.
Puts everything under the auspices of the CRTC. And it's gonna completely bugger up your YouTube feeds.
The same CRTC that's allowing Rogers and Shaw to merge?
Yep.
Same one.
Those guys?
Yep.
It's basically an attempt to stop people from getting news from independent internet media.
Yeah. Because now it allows the CRTC to impose Canadian content quotas on distribution platforms like YouTube and Facebook and other stuff. And
But is it okay?
And then people have to, the content creators have to apply for Canadian content adjudication or certification,
And they just make the process.
and they make the process, and the process
arduous.
is completely Byzantine. And
So
okay.
only legacy media can do it.
What I've heard, and this
Or
is,
state media.
I haven't been paying a lot of attention to this. I've read this in one or two places with similar things. My understanding of it was the whole rationale behind it started with Facebook saying, okay, they're going to do a test period, much like they did in Australia, of limiting certain news feeds to Facebook users, right? And that was because the Canadian government was introducing what I presume is C11. I didn't catch the number.
yeah,
And the reason the the Canadian government was undergoing this exercise was because Facebook isn't paying the news outlet
For its content.
for its content by sharing it to whoever, in this case, Canadians,
Yep.
right? That to me seems a legitimate debating point, right? To say, okay, Facebook, why do you get to take the Washington Post and just arbitrarily use your algorithms to feed it to Trent for free? Should Facebook not be paying the Washington Post for this?
except they can't, because Washington Post has got such a strict paywall. You can't even click on one of those things.
The other thing is, if you get that link to Washington Post article, when you pull it up, you are now exposed to Washington Post advertisers.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's really in the benefit of Washington Post, because now they get access to you, which they otherwise wouldn't have had.
I get it, right? And the funny thing is, nowhere in this conversation, these articles that I've read, is Washington Post. I just use those.
Yeah, I understand.
Is Washington Post or any other media outlet part of the discussion? This is a discussion between the Canadian government and Facebook, and the Canadian government is saying, Facebook, you're not paying.
Right.
Washington Post, for example, for their stuff. So now that you guys are putting this different light, I'm kind of looking at this going, what the fuck are we talking about after all, right? Because why isn't the Washington Post or anyone like them speaking up about this?
They're not.
I don't.
Because
I mean, no, some of them are. Some of them are.
I think that narrative is largely used as a distraction.
Yes, I think it's just spurious.
Well, that's what I'm wondering.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right?
It's just spurious, right? It's an excuse. It's
Is
not.
it a
Yeah.
CanCon concept?
Yeah.
Well, is it?
Yeah, because the principal piece of the legislation, or part of the legislation, gives the CRATC the authority to enforce CanCon rules on distribution platforms that transmit into Canada. So YouTube, Facebook,
Right.
TikTok, Snapchat, whichever. And then they get to approve what CanCon is. And so you're not automatically CanCon just because you're producing and distributing content in Canada.
No.
You have to go through this process of applying for CanCon, and you have to meet certain criteria, and it's
Which are very, very
onerous and expensive and
vague
vague. Yeah.
and open-ended, so they can be interpreted the way the CRTC wants when they want to interpret that. So basically, we can only get access to CBC and the Toronto Star. We won't be able to get access to Daily Wire, Daily Caller, The Rebel, True North,
Yeah.
any of these
Epoch Times or-
alternate
Yeah.
media forms that aren't nice to the Liberal Party.
Yeah.
And that, to me, is the real purpose of C11. When you read into the legislation, it's to re-establish the progressive monopoly on the information space that existed before the internet. It's a desire to return to that. And I think they do have allies within the legacy media because they have struggled ever since the invention of the internet.
Oh, no question. I mean, how many? When was the last time anyone bought a newspaper? I don't know if the Sun or the Journal actually have print copies anymore.
They still do. I still see them at the grocery store.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure it's only seniors.
Yeah, probably. Or restaurants.
Right? And
And
how,
Like breakfast places, right?
how
Yeah.
much have they cut down on staff? Right?
Oh, lots.
Now
It's insane.
all-
Yeah.
lots.
Huge, yeah.
it's
I
mostly
mean, you
online.
hear about this over and over and over again.
Yeah.
That major newspapers, the big ones, the Times, New York Times, WAPO, Globe and Mail, the big newspapers, they used to have bureaus around
The world. Yeah.
Yeah.
in at least on every continent, and in many places in the United States, they would have bureaus on each coast and in several cities. Like you would have a bureau in New York, you would have another one in Boston, you'd have another one in Philly, like Chicago, and to be the bureau chief of New York City for the Sunday Times, that was a major appointment. Like that was, in the 1960s, that was, you've arrived.
Well,
If
yeah,
you've
because
done
I
that,
mean,
you know.
what are the two largest financial markets in the world? New York and London. Right?
Yep.
So,
Yeah, so if you're the bureau chief, like if you're the Los Angeles bureau chief for the New York Times, you've arrived. Like that is a prominent position. Those are gone. The idea of any newspaper in the world having a bureau anywhere it doesn't happen anymore.
no, you
Newsrooms.
just find a freelancer or something.
Well,
Exactly.
you get a freelancer,
Exactly.
or you
Exactly.
outsource it to Reuters or AFP or
Yep.
CP or
That's
whatever.
that's actually something that's getting me all the time. It's like every article I read, someone is just quoting someone else's article.
Yep.
Yes.
So first of all, they're not doing their own shit.
No, the vast majority of reporting is on someone
They're,
else's
they're
reporting.
just someone else has said this, and I just find this suspiciously like okay, and you're not taking responsibility for this article either. You're kind of making sure you quote this other. So there's nothing original going on. They're
Yep.
all repetitive. Like
Yep.
I do not need anyone to tell me anymore what the Wagner Group is. We've been reading about them for
Yep.
5 fucking months.
Yeah.
Why are you telling me? Oh yeah, by the way, the Wagner Group is the group of mercenaries headed by blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
And Putin chef, who's this? Yeah, I know who he is too. Thank you. Right? Stop telling me stuff we already. It's like
Yeah.
everybody's regurgitating. the same endless stream of reiteration.
Yep. Or like last time I noticed it was with the Nova Scotia shooter.
Yeah.
It was the exact same article over. Like I get it from Canadian Press, got it from CBC, got it from CTV, got it from Global. It was almost word for word.
Yeah. Same person. Yeah. And
It's the same author.
What really pisses me off these days is the fucking grammar and spelling is atrocious. The only two examples, and this is horrendous. The only two examples I've come across in the last year since I've really started paying attention of flawless grammar and spelling, National Review, and I was on the website for the BDC, and the BDC again. Their grammar, like they're actually taking the time. Nobody else.
National Review does have good editing. I'll give them that.
Yeah, their editors take.
Well,
their editors take a little pride in that one, but
yeah, they do. And I imagine any publication that's going to have Charles Cook and Kevin Williamson on it, they're going to be sticklers for editing.
Williamson's gone.
Where did he go?
Dispatch with Jonah Goldberg and.
Really?
Yep.
Goldberg is another very articulate guy. I would imagine that he would be very upset if an issue came out and there was a grammatical error. I could imagine that.
Yeah, he got poached by the Dispatch. Williamson, because listen to Williamson, especially when because he and Charlie Cook used to do Mad Dogs in English.
Yeah.
Listening to Williamson, I always get the impression he's kind of a bit of an antisocial, like bit of a misanthrope. Mm-hmm. And He jumped ship from National Review to go to the Atlantic for like a week, and they got fired from the Atlantic. So the National Review hired him back, of course, because he's Kevin Williamson.
Yeah.
And then once the Dispatch had enough money to afford him, he jumped ship there, and he's gone to the Dispatch, and that's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
But it's just like National Review is just kind of this place where he's just like treading water until he can get a different offer.
Yeah.
But
I can see that though.
But if the Dispatch is poaches Charlie Cook, I'll cancel my National Review subscription and go to the Dispatch. But the Dispatch right now isn't.
I've spoken to you guys before about a guy who was kind of a mentor to me when I was younger.
A liberal of all things.
Yes, he's very
small L liberal.
No, big L liberal. He's hard partisan Democrat.
Sorry.
Yeah.
He's American.
Oh yes.
Yes. Well, I mean small L liberal. I mean.
Oh yeah.
Not liberal party.
Yeah. In the American sense. Yeah. Because like often in Canada, you talk about liberal, you're talking about like Thomas Hobbes or Adam Smith.
Well, if you're talking classical liberal or
big L liberal is Liberal Party.
Yeah.
Small L liberal is a classical liberal.
Yeah. Which is almost a conservative.
Anyway, he was faculty at Yale, and he left that to come up to Canada to work in the theater where I met him. And then that didn't happen.
You worked in theater?
This is a very, very tenuous point. I was the stage doorman.
Okay.
It was my first professional job. It was my first full-time job.
Cool.
And so you remember Scooter in a Muppet Show?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's what I did.
Okay.
I was Scooter.
Scooter was important.
People, in a way, stage door was an important support position because you were kind of like Man Friday.
Yeah.
You did everything. Your finger was in every aspect of how that theater ran.
Yeah.
Which was cool. But at the same time, it was an unskilled position.
Yeah.
And very easy to replace. It was like a waiter.
Yeah.
Right? A restaurant needs good waiters. And you know immediately. If you're in a restaurant, you know immediately when your best waiter leaves.
Yeah.
Like it leaves a huge gap. And if you got guys who are just mailing it in, the place suffers. But you're not going to pay that guy $80,000 a year.
No.
He's a waiter. You know what I mean? You'll find a new one. So anyway, that's what I did. It was in a stage door. He came and worked as an artistic director. And he clashed immediately with the egomaniac who was the director general. So that's why he left.
Was this at Citadel?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I asked him, well, what are you going to do? He said, well, he could go back to Yale. He had an offer to go back. He was faculty there. He had an offer to go back. I said, well, why don't you? I said, I don't like going to where I've already been. It feels like I'm just like treadmilling.
Mm-hmm.
He's always looking for something new, something different to grow, right? So I get that.
Mm-hmm.
He just doesn't want to be in a place he's already been.
Yeah.
He wants to find a new experience. And there is something refreshing about going to a new organization in the same industry. Like, I don't think I'm going to go back and volunteer with the Loyal Ladies.
Yeah.
When I go back and volunteer, I'm going to volunteer with a different unit. Because working with different units, especially different trades, is really neat because I get to see the old business from a completely new angle.
Yeah.
So
that is really cool. So I can see why Williamson is wanting to find a new company.
Yeah.
here's a question. This actually came up yesterday with Vince Morose. Because we were talking about what you were doing. And I said, I know you're up at head shit.
Yep.
Are you still an Eddie?
Yes, I'm badged loyal.
Okay.
But I
are
have
you still
nothing to do with the unit.
Are you a reservist or
Yes.
are you regular? Okay, so you're Class C.
Class B. Permanent Class B.
Permanent
which
Class
is kind of between Class C and...
Okay.
It's sort of Class C, except I can't be deployed outside of Canada.
Can't be?
Cannot. I can be, but they have to flip me to a Class C contract.
But you were down at Fort Polk, right?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Longer than 90 days.
Okay.
Yeah. I can't be 89 days outside of Canada.
Huh.
No. So. And like,
Who do you want?
I am no longer in, like I can no longer say my UIC is 5122 Loyal Leamington Regiment. I am no longer in the Loyal Leamington Regiment. I no longer occupy a position within the Loyal Leamington Regiment. The Loyal Leamington Regiment has no influence or control over me whatsoever. My unit is the 3rd Canadian Division Primary Reserve List. The PRL is a holding formation, a paper formation, because legally a Reg Force guy can be posted to a reserve unit, but a reservist cannot be posted to a Reg Force unit. It's a very stupid and archaic rule, but the Army's all about stupid and archaic rules. So they create this paper formation called the PRL. So even though you might be a reservist, primarily say with intelligence, INTOPS, HRA and FSA clerks. You could be an HRA clerk working with one CER, and one CER administers you. Their orderly room, you're occupying their position number, their orderly room handles your administration, but legally,
You're not part of the unit.
you are in 3-Div PRL. Everybody who is a reservist working for a regular force unit in Western Canada is in 3-Div PRL. And your administrator or your rights are not even that. Legally, you belong to that UIC Building 700 up on base. Even though
None of them know each other. They
like
don't
say
parade together. They,
Sean Spence
yeah.
came over to the Winnipeg Rifles. He is now the ops NCO at CFB Shiloh. And he's technically a reserve. Technically, he's in 3-Div PRL. When in reality, he works for CFB Shiloh. They control his CFTPO rates. They control his admin. They control his promotion. They control his career course and all that shit. So it's just a paper entity. Like Charlie Company, 3VP.
Paper entity.
There's no Charlie Company?
No. Well, it's 4 NCOs and 3 guys on crutches, but that's what it is.
That's good.
It exists on paper.
Like second company LER? Or B company?
Actually,
B company probably has more strength than.
briefly, B Company had 3 platoons.
Really?
Yeah. Well,
Then they all got absorbed into the
Mortar Platoon
Okay.
is B Company. 4 Platoon, which is your guys who've got BMQ or are waiting DP1, and then 5 Platoon, who are your BM nothings. In theory, like there were times when I was there, we had some really good turnouts. Like they were full platoons, full fucking platoons, and we'd be on an exercise, like a unit exercise. So B Company would have some shit that we were doing in Wainwright as well, and B Company outnumbered A, because we'd have our mortar guys, about 20 guys in mortars, full fucking 25 guys in 4 platoon, 32 guys in 5 platoon. A section of them were in cities because they didn't have their uniforms yet.
Yeah.
And we kitted them out in Alpenflash that we got from 6 Int. But, you know, we had like this, kind of like the A company guys would walk in, like there's a platoon minus A company. Like, who in the fuck?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Really? A company was that bad at the time?
When I was there, the last 2 years that I was there, I showed up for every A company exercise on Friday and I counted them. And they never once had more than 10 guys at the private or corporate level.
Wow.
What?
Never.
Private and corporal?
Yep.
10 guys?
They never had double digits.
What the fuck happened? Late 90s, early 2000s, we had good numbers.
Yeah. Yeah.
There were
Well,
there were at least 2 full.
This
platoons.
is why I'm on the outs with the LARs right now. Because I see that as a huge problem. They don't. They think it's fine. They have range X's where they'll get like a good platoon coming out. But like,
Even that's pathetic.
yeah. What I point out to them is, okay, when was the last time the order was given to cam up? We're talking a decade. When was the last time A company did a dismounted platoon attack? Or like a dry platoon attack? Like where you had a full weapons deck with a C6 firing blank. Decade. Don't do that shit anymore. Like, you remember the Binzomatic PlayStation?
Yeah.
Where we...
That was the heyday. That was at the
the
time,
heyday.
it was annoying as fuck because I'd gotten used to the regiment being a certain way. And then all of a sudden it was like, every Wednesday we were
Foot on
parading.
the gas.
Every
Yeah.
second Saturday we were parading, and every second weekend between those two Saturdays, we were in fucking Wainwright.
Yep.
Yep.
It was like, where the fuck did this come from?
Yep. That was... And that was...
Looking back, like
Oh, it was awesome.
it was a bit. It sucked a little at the time. It took some getting used to, but now I look back, that was the best.
In,
Yeah, that was the best
in
training.
2003, the Loyal Edmonton Regiment had more field days than the first
Yeah.
battalion.
Yeah.
Then which?
Than first
Yeah,
battalion.
we had...
Really?
Yeah. Because we counted the FOA.
Yeah.
I remember that. Yeah. The loyal, like, as a unit, not necessarily like for every individual soldier, but as a unit, LAR A company spent more nights in the field than 1st Battalion did.
No shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's because BINs prioritized collective training over Wednesday nights.
Yeah.
And I do remember when we would run out of money and they'd shit can Wednesday nights. And I remember being like, oh, that fucking sucks. Because that was easy money.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't do anything. I showed up, I signed in for half a day and fucked around.
Yeah, you know, made yourself scarce. Head somewhere. We'll talk to
Yeah,
the people. Show
exactly.
the queue.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought that was only for me in stores. I thought you guys were actually doing shit.
No, I mean, only if you got caught. If you couldn't get away with it. Like, if you found somewhere to hide, yeah, you could get away with it, right? But Wednesdays have never been effective.
No.
Ever. Like, okay, we show up at 18:30. Generally. We have half an hour to find out who's here, take our attendance, get people organized, and find out, okay, you know, what our rough numbers are going to be. 1900, we start. Okay, so let's draw weapons. Okay, 1930. Everybody's got to draw from the same cage. Can't do it quick. 1930. Okay, 1930, we got our weapons, now we can go do something. Well, it's also going to take half an hour to shut everything down.
Yeah.
So now we have to be back at 2100 to hand in weapons so we can get ready for any kind of dismissal parade or out routines at 2130 because the whole fucking place turns into a pumpkin at 2145.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, which gives you 15 minutes, presuming it only takes you half an hour to turn in weapons.
Right. So we've got that narrow 1.5 hour time frame between 1930 and 2100
Yeah.
in which we can, like, so we got 90 minutes to do some kind of training. All right, what are we going to do? What do we do in
now
a
that it's
building?
1930?
Yeah.
What are we gonna do?
So usually there's no forethought in the training. Like the way A company works now is they all kind of get together and say, okay, who's the most junior master corporal that we can dump some shit on? There's no planning. There's no prepared timetable in advance. Well, there might be now, but 2 years ago there wasn't. Like we made sure we had shit like that in B company because we had guys like fucking like Marshall running shit like that. You know, guys who were dead.
Well, wasn't
what
Zeke?
they were doing.
I like Zeke was serious.
Yeah,
Is Zeke still?
he was sort of major.
Okay.
He doesn't have fucking time to run shit at the section level, right?
Okay.
So, but A company at the sergeant level, right? B company has always kind of attracted the guys who wanted to do shit because you were off the radar. Nobody paid attention to B company. Nobody gave a flying fuck. So if you wanted to go take them out and do shit, you did. You try and do that with A company? It's like, whoa. You didn't fill out a fucking transport annex for that. Or, there's too much attention paid to A company. And if the reserves for me is a social club, where I come out, I drink coffee, stand around a butt can for a little bit, tell some stories, and they go up to the mess. I'm not here to do soldiering. I'm not here to work. I did that. I'm done with that shit. I just want to kind of still be in a uniform, still wear the suit on Remembrance Day, because I like the social cachet of it. I'm not here to actually run around in the fucking toonies and shit like that, carry heavy shit. Fuck that. I want to talk about being in the infantry. I don't want to be in the infantry anymore. I've done that. So if you go trying to make shit happen, well, I'm the platoon 2IC. Now I got to do my fucking job. I don't want to do that. So, I clamp down on you. I said, no, you can't do that. You haven't approved that. You didn't get authorization for this, that, or other. So, guys like that, like the Johnny Foleses of the world, they kind of feel suffocated and they go to B company where nobody fucking cares.
Johnny Falls, that was the Brit, right?
I know he was the tattooed motherfucker, ex-airborne guy who's tattooed from the earlobes down.
Yes.
Yeah.
Has a tattoo parlor. Lives half the year in Mexico now.
Wasn't there a British guy, Johnny someone?
John Caldwell.
Caldwell, right.
The Mahatma John Caldwell.
We were last time before you. I think you got here before you did, where I was telling John Caldwell stories. But
yeah. But that was back in the Jack Binns days.
Yeah.
You didn't have this problem. Now, I'm also going to say that part of this was a result of the turn of the century, the 90s and the 2000s, when we were at such a rapid pace with deployments, constant deployments. At any one time, 25% of our people were on deployment. At any one time.
Former Yugo, then...
Yeah, going right from Yugo, seamless, 2001 into Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Constant flow of people on deployment. So you had difficulty with consistency. The other part is we were in such demand to produce people, or back that up. At any one time now, 20% of rotations were reserve. The regular force could no longer afford to just, fuck whatever. Militia, we're going to set up militia training centers in places like Dundurn and Vernon and fucking Meaford, and you got to do whatever the fuck you want and just keep your own little fucking side there. We don't give a shit about you. Now, okay, we can't operate without you guys. We're going to make sure that your training is to our standard. No more militia fast and loose. We will train you.
So that's when the MTC at Wainwright came to be.
Right.
Okay.
And the regular force started taking all of the reserve training slots. So that whole class, I guess, of MOBUMs, guys who worked seasonally through the winter, and then just automatically took it as a given that they were going to work in the MTC all summer, that they were going to teach all summer, those guys were now out of a job for 4 months. And so they had to get permanent year-round work. That culture died because it wasn't sustainable anymore. The regular force took over all reserve training. You didn't get trained at an MTC. You got trained at Wainwright. You got trained at PET. You got trained at Valcartier. You got trained at Gagetown by all regular force instructors. And then we went into this. So all the reserve units had to do. The other thing was no more collective training. The idea was there's no point in the LARs training as a company. You're not going to deploy as a company. You're going to deploy as individuals, as onesies and twosies. And you're going to get stuck wherever we have openings for you. Whatever collective training you need will be done at the brigade training event in workup to Rhoda. So all the reserve unit needs to do is recruit, run BMQ, and administer your people between rotos. We will do everything else. And so that started the kind of ball rolling in that culture change of we don't need to do the Jack Binns company exercise anymore. It's redundant. Why? You're not deploying as a company. You don't need that. Now, incredibly short-sighted, like the whole train to need concept. Incredibly short-sighted.
Binns always hated it.
Yes.
One of the things he always wanted. He always hated the concept of workup of a 6-month workup. Right.
Yes.
He always pointed out like, the workup training for a rotation was 6 months, so 180 days. Royal Marine Commando school at the time was like 10 days longer. And that takes people from civilian to you're ready to go to war.
Yeah. So when I hire a guy in a regular force for a 3-year initial engagement,
Yeah, you're taking 1/6 of that.
what's he doing when he's not on workup?
Nothing.
Yeah, why isn't he worked up?
Yeah. So I have him for 9 months, 3-month workup, 6-month deployment. What's he doing
Well, okay,
the
so
rest of that time? That we need that kind of workup.
so I have 2 questions about that. One is, and they're both, so one's theater specific. So is this, okay, we're preparing these groups for the theater and type of warfare, right? So we built a mock-up of Afghanistan,
Yep.
this is what we're going to
Yep.
train on. So that to me makes a certain amount of sense.
Yeah.
Does it take 6 months?
No.
I don't know. Right. The other bit is, okay, we're going into working with NATO. Now you're going to be working, depending on where you are, you might be working with the Germans, the Americans, the Dutch, the Danes. Who the fuck knows?
Yeah.
Right. So, and you've got this mixed chain of command, and you're in something that's now all of a sudden there's something larger than whatever 3rd Brigade, Western Canada. Right. And you need to get used to that. So, but that, again, if you've got a Red Force guys in particular, that's some of the workup training they should be doing as professional.
Theater mission specific training is stuff that we should be doing. Like, it becomes even easier when you have an active deployment, right? Like, let's say, like we're doing in the new managed readiness program. So then, 2div is deploying. They're handling all the deployments. 3div is in the hopper. We're working up. 4div is reconstituting. Like they just got back.
Yeah.
Now they're reconstituting. And then that's the kind of scheme that we're in. Rotationally way that, we handle all that stuff. So if there is a deployment, let's say we're going to Afghanistan. All of that mission specific shit, and we know that we're going to be in Afghanistan for the next few years. If I'm in 4div and I know that next year, like there's 2 6-month rotos will both be absorbed by 3div next year. Then I'm going to be in the hopper for the next 2 rotos. Okay, I know that we're going to Afghanistan. I should be doing nothing but TMST in that entire year reconstitution phase, or 2 years that I got, because this is 2div this year, 3div next year, 3 years from now is me. So I should be doing nothing but TMST.
Yeah, you should be ready to go when the time comes.
Yeah. So again, what is the workup
Yeah,
training?
because by the time
Why?
by the time Vince and company, Morales and Arndt went over. That was 06. They did their workup training, but Canada had been in Afghanistan for
3 or 4 years.
Since 2003 regular, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's
I mean,
2.5
the mission
years
had
easy.
just changed to Kandahar,
Yeah.
I think the Roto before. They were
Could
like
be.
Roto 2 into Kandahar or something like that.
Okay.
Maybe 3.
Yeah.
Like the
Were
mission
they
just
Kabul
changed.
before that?
Kabul, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first couple of Rotos from Kabul. Oh, we had 3rd Battalion
Roto Zero,
In
where were they?
Kandahar.
They weren't Kandahars.
in 2001.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there was a year and a half after they got blowed up.
Where nobody was there.
Well, no, Bins
Except guys like Bins.
was like
Yeah.
the Canadian contingent after 1st Battalion left from, or 3rd Battalion left from Roto
He
Zero.
was there near the end of 3rd Battalion's time.
Yep.
Where they really didn't do much anything.
Yeah.
Or they did the wetback. They walked around, but other than the snipers, they had no contact.
Yeah.
And then,
And then there was a year and a half, I think, between.
yeah, where we didn't have any
'Cause there
real
was-
organized collective presence.
Because we went, no, it must have been 2000 before the next Roto went, because 2003, Bins, Vernon, Crott, and I all went down to road trip down to Arizona to see some of Bins' friends and go tour a gun site and go to a big gun show in Arizona. And on the way down, I was bitching about, like, is there any point to this? Because we weren't in Afghanistan at the time. Doesn't look like we're going back. And I don't see a point. Like, the best I can hope for is that we're gonna be part of the naval blockade of a landlocked country, right? That's how I saw it at the time, and this was 2003, and then I went to Iraq. I went to do pre-deployment training for KBR in the second half of December 2004, and we still hadn't gone back yet. And it must have been just after I got there in 2005 that they redeployed or something.
Yeah, somewhere around 05, 06, something like that.
Yeah.
There was a period when there weren't Canadians in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In between, Roto Zero went early, went with everybody else, and then there was a big gap after that.
Yeah.
They did one Roto, and
Then they redid the mission, and they said, okay, we're going to Kabul.
yeah.
And then I think there was just a lot of diplomatic pressure. Say, look, there's nothing going on in Kabul. So then we moved. I think the Katian government got us into Kabul. It was under the Harper government that I think that we moved
To Kandahar, yeah.
to Kandahar.
Yeah.
And then that's where the mission was right up for the next 10 years, right up until the end of withdrawal. So that period changed the culture of the reserves. And then, again, I don't think it was correct, but that was part of the idea that you don't need collective training.
Well, it also it sets itself up in a vicious circle, right? Because now it's, it's like now we can't turn right, turn left, or right on our red light anymore.
Yeah.
Because we can't be trusted to turn right at a red light anymore.
Yeah.
Because in some ways we can't be trusted to turn right at a red light anymore.
Yeah.
If the regs take over the training of the militia and take the training away from them,
Then we lose the ability to train.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so we can't train ourselves.
This
up
is
to
biting
this
us in the ass now because the regular force is now too small. They cannot train the militia anymore. So 3 years ago they said, look, the reserve must train itself. This is a huge problem because the culture of, like, the demographics of the reserve has changed. The MOBUM isn't there anymore. It's now the guy who has a permanent full-time job, who was recruited with the idea that I'm never leaving home. I will never leave my home unit, except when I want to go on tour. So there are 3 legs to what the reserve has to do in its job, like as a reserve. Augment the regular force on deployment, augment the regular force on collective training, things like Maple Resolve, like collective, JPMRC, stuff like that. Collective training exercise, big exercises, and then augment the regular force in the training system. The reserve is still really big on going on tour. Really big on going on tour. Because that benefits the individual reservist. They are notoriously unreliable for the other 2. And this is a huge bone of contention with the regular force. They are, oh my, and I get it. Now I get some of the Mo hatred. Now that I'm on the other end of it. Where you get, reservists jamming out of fucking tasks, like three days to go beforehand. Holy fuck.
Well, and it was like that when we were in.
Yeah.
It's going to be worse now.
Yeah.
But again, if you haven't been, to me, the obvious solution is if you want to supplement the reg force on X. You don't do it piecemeal. If you want numbers, you get the reserve units in there. In addition to which, it gives those units and the reg force the experience of actually working as units and working as part of something larger than themselves.
But then you probably have to make it mandatory.
Yeah, and I think you should. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah.
Like to say, okay, let's say there's a minimum number of days you must parade. Like we have that now.
Yeah.
You must you must appear in at least one parade every 30 calendar days, and you must be given a minimum of 2 opportunities to make that parade. So that way you can't go NES over summer stand down.
Right.
If the unit closes, you don't have an opportunity to parade, you can't be NES.
Yeah.
But it's like during the training year.
But now, like if you want to deploy constituted reserve units, then those people have to be mandated to go.
Yes.
Like,
Well, yeah.
Yes.
Plus, but
it is like tell your boss you won't be here for these 2 weeks,
Exactly.
and you are.
we need a societal understanding.
So you need basically you have to go. You have to reservists would have to have unlimited liability, like the Reg Force does.
Kinda. Or we simply say, okay, look, we are always going to get the training plan 1 year in advance. Always, 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 no matter what. And then we say, okay, I'm just going to throw something out here. The last week of August is going to be a big exercise. Like a big, huge CF-wide exercise. The last week of August, always. Fucking put it in your calendar, you know it's coming. If that is mandatory, if you cannot attend that X, hand in your kit. That's it, I'm sorry, hand in your kit.
Yeah.
And there will be an adjustment period, but then it's just, you just give people, like, right now, people understand, you join the reserves, you're going to have to go to basic training. You are going to have to leave and go do your DP1. Whatever trade, you will go away from home and you're going to do it. Yeah. So make your arrangements. And if you're not prepared to do that, hand in your kit.
Well, yeah, but that comes with the terms, and I remember that.
We can do that with collective training.
Yeah.
Well, I can't. I've got responsibility. Okay, I'm sorry. You can't be a part of this organization. You came to us. We didn't come to you.
Yeah.
We are not mandating you to join the reserves.
You weren't drafted. You weren't press ganged. Nobody held a gun to your head to make you join the
That's
reserve.
right.
Yeah.
Well, if you do it, you need to understand the commitment you're making.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What got me was...
Well, I mean, they do that. The National Guard does that, right? Like they have major training events for the U.S. National Guard.
Yeah.
You know, throughout the year, or whatever, a couple of years.
Although that said, they do have job protection.
Yeah, they have
Exactly.
job.
It's the job
must give
protection.
you that time off.
Yeah.
Okay, we're not going to get that, but at the same time,
I don't know that we couldn't get that.
we don't need it.
Probably not. Yeah.
I
Ben's
know-
always argued that we never
my
needed it,
impression-
and it's probably true.
My impression was when I was, and since then, just when it comes up in conversation, a lot of civilian employers don't know what a reservist is.
No, they don't.
No.
Right? They don't understand what that means.
Yeah.
They don't understand the commitment, right? And so they don't understand that this person could need to leave at some point,
Yeah.
right? And there was their quote unquote responsibilities, or the situation at least that's going to leave the employer in.
Yep.
Right. But back to one of your other points, I remember. So I don't remember. Like I knew when I went to basic, I was going to be spending 11 weeks in Wayne Ring, doing my QL2, QL3 back to back. Right? I knew that.
You know that.
So I went through that. What pissed me off was RSM Mundorf showed up to give us our CAT badges.
Yep.
Once we'd
Graduated.
graduated. Right. And he's there and he said, "Oh, by the way, don't pack your bags because the units could be down here for some massive fucking X.
Wayne Con.
That's 10 days long or something like that. And, and the regiment's very excited to have you on board." And I'm like, I just spent 11 weeks here. I was told about those 11 weeks, and I just made plans to go fly to Barrie and hang out with my kid.
Yeah.
So, fuck you very much.
Yeah.
Right? Like.
Yeah, see, that's piss poor planning.
Yeah.
That was piss poor planning.
And that was RSF Mundorf. He was good.
Now,
right?
why did they not? How hard would that have been to simply tack that onto your course?
Or
To tell you that back in February, say it's 12 weeks.
Yeah.
yeah,
How hard would that have been? To say this collective training event is now a requirement for your TQ1.
I guess.
How hard would that have been? And then you have the choice. You say, you know what, 11 weeks I was willing to do. 12? No. Sorry, I'm not going to
Well,
do it.
if
You know what I mean?
Well-
Like, it wouldn't have been that big a deal if they had told you
Yeah.
back in February, because then you said, okay, I'll go to Barrie week 13.
yeah,
It wouldn't have been that hard. Right? And now let's say we do that. I say, you will attend this week-long training event. And we usually do them at the end so that we have that new intake of trained troops. So, okay, this is a mandatory event. Now let's say I joined the MO and I was a student, okay? I want this employment through the summers, blah, 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 okay? I've gone through trade school, I'm now working. But let's say I drank the Kool-Aid. Let's say, like I'm doing this. I want to be a part of this forever. When I go to an interview, I'm saying, like, this is important to me. I'm making a commitment to this because this is something I want to do. By the way, I'm a reservist. I need a leave of absence the last week of August every year. I'm sorry, I can't give you that. Okay, thank you for your time. I'm going to go to the next job. I mean, let's face it, that's what the Kool-Aid drinker is going to do. Look at how many times have you met a guy or talked to a guy in the LERs or somewhere else in the reserve community where they could have had a better job
tons.
Oh,
in
yeah.
another city, but they didn't take it because they didn't want to leave the regiment.
Or a better relationship was one that always blew my mind.
Yeah.
You have these
How many
switched on
marriages?
troops,
Yeah.
and you met the women that they're with. It's like, holy fuck, seriously? Right? Like,
How many marriages have been lost to the reserves?
yeah.
So don't tell me that no one's going to join the reserve if they have to make that week that 1 week.
No, and I'm not
They
saying
will.
that. I'm just
They
saying
will.
that particularly pissed me off. That was some piss poor.
Sure,
planning.
but again, piss poor planning.
Yeah.
We could do this where we say, okay, in the what is it? 4 days.
Are you getting all this? We're getting all this, right? Because it sounds like this is becoming our episode.
See, yeah, this is our episode. 27, 28, 29, 30 December.
Yeah.
You got 4 days, where almost every business shuts down.
Yeah.
That's 4 days that you could do a collective winter training exercise.
Not only that, the start of that is like 27th is Ortona Day, and I mean, you could actually give yourself, okay, let's commemorate that. And now we're gonna do some urban training.
Maybe it's just because
By
I'm
the way.
old and I'm not keen
Right.
anymore, but I don't want to fucking do anything between Christmas and New Year's.
That's true.
True, but
Some of the younger
you've
troops
handed in
might.
your kit, so it's okay.
Well, I mean, we got three factors at play here.
I mean,
right?
we do have to do winter training.
Yeah, true.
Have to.
Yeah.
There's no better time to do it.
Yeah, then those 4 days.
Either that, or you could say first week in January.
Yeah.
Because not a lot of businesses have really kicked in after that Christmas
Yeah, not only
season.
that, the first week of January sucks anyways.
Yeah, it's a good time to be
Exactly.
stuck
No,
in the woods.
exactly.
You don't want to drop that in the middle because
Yep.
between Christmas and New Year's Eve,
Yep.
fuck,
Like,
you're still digesting Christmas
Yeah,
dinner.
and you know and this is valid. This is valid. And you could make the argument for first week in January.
Yeah.
Because number one, most businesses are still slow because people have spent all of their money
Yeah.
on the holiday season, so there's not a huge retail expenditure.
No.
There's not a huge capital expenditure.
No.
People aren't buying things, people aren't getting things repaired. People aren't initiating home rent. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the economy is at a lower point. So it's easier for employers to give a guy that leave of absence
Yeah.
in that week.
Plus, troops need the money.
And
So
yeah,
the troops
a
are
lot of
trying to-
troops will want
I think
extra cash.
We've got three factors at play here. One
So-
is the dysfunctional relationship between the Mo and the Regs.
Yeah.
Um,
And then you should see it in the Armored Corps. Oh my God.
Between Mo and Regs?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
it's bad. Number one,
The guys in their Jeeps and then the guys in their tanks.
the Armored Corps in and of itself is going through a very existential crisis right now. We've got 3 full-time regiments. We've got 11 Rubber Boot Company, Dragoons, Strats. We got no tanks.
Yeah, we were talking about this last time.
We got like 5 that run.
Yeah.
No, more. They went to Ukraine.
Yeah, I think most of our runners went to Ukraine. But anyway, we've only got enough tanks for one unit, and not even that unit,
Yeah.
but like one squadron of tanks. They will all be concentrated within the Strats. That decision has been made, probably because of proximity to Suffield. Okay. So, boom. We got the only armored presence that we're going to have is in that one unit and only in a squadron of that unit.
Okay.
How much armored reconnaissance do we really need? Do we need 2.5 full battalions
No.
of armored reconnaissance? We don't. We just don't. You need a squadron per brigade of armored reconnaissance. You don't need a battalion's worth. So what do we do with the rest of the RCDs? What do we do with the rest of Rubber Boot Company? What do we do with the third squadron of the Strats, which is the spare dick at the wedding? What do we do with them? Well, they've tried to create this concept called armored cavalry, which is basically an attempt by the Armored Corps to justify their existence. And the whole idea is, well, it's kind of like armored recce, but you shoot at the enemy. You're prepared to engage the enemy. Kind of like
In the United States, they call this a cavalry scout.
David Sterling rat patrol kind of thing, where we're going to do drive-by shoot-'em-ups.
But okay,
And
but what vehicles are we using?
Well, let's not talk about vehicles. Let's not talk about it. Yeah, that's all.
That's down the road.
Well, you're venturing another realm, right? Because
I'm trying to justify careers and positions and cap badges.
so it's the cap badges. This is what I want to do, right?
Yeah,
so
it's
now,
cap badges.
okay, we need to realistically look at what does Canada need for its own defense, right? Militarily speaking, within the diplomatic world,
Yeah.
foreign policy,
Yep.
right? What are our commitments? NATO. So how do we realistically structure ourselves, right? And then we go back and we look at, okay, what has our military theory been through the conflicts we've been involved in, right?
Try and get a superpower to defend us for us.
Well, I mean, cart before horse. Like when we got to the Second War,
Yeah.
right? What was the structure of our armed forces by the time we got
Like,
in theater, right?
well,
So we had armor fulfilling certain functions.
From the get-go, and I'm going to go back to 1754.
Okay.
Canada's strategy has always been try and outsource our defense to the nearest friendly superpower. Get France to handle all the expenditure and outlay and effort of our national defense. Okay? That didn't work. Okay, England. We want you to handle all the effort and outlay and expense of our national defense. Okay? That worked until World War II. England's bankrupt. They can't do it anymore. Okay, America. We would like you to do all the heavy lifting for our defense. We don't want to spend on guns. We want to spend on butter. And then when an emergency does come and we can't wiggle our way out of it, we'll create an army when we need it. It worked in 1914. It worked in 1939. It worked in 1950. And we held that idea. Well, it barely worked in 1950. It almost took too long. And if we didn't have the Second World War generation that was already trained to fill the ranks, it would have failed. And we understood that. So then we realized after the Korean War, okay, we do need a standing army. We do need a professional military that can react at the moment of crisis. In the age of industrialized, mechanized warfare, we don't have time to mobilize an army from the ground up like we did in 1914. We're not going to have the pause of the phony war in 1940 and then the pause imposed by the English Channel in 1941 that allows us 2.5 years, well, not even 4 years, because it was 1943 before we were ready for full-fledged combat operations, even though we started in 1939.
Well, discounting the...
which showed that we weren't ready. Our soldiers...
It wasn't just us.
At the platoon level, we were ready.
Yeah.
At the command level, we were not. If you look at the staff work, Dieppe wasn't a disaster because our soldiers failed at the platoon level.
No, God.
It was a disaster because our staff work failed at the guys who were major and above. Because our colonels, our generals weren't good enough. And they never were good enough, if you ask me. A guy like Chris Vokes, that guy was a clown. Like, all he understood was frontal assault, frontal assault, frontal assault. How many thousands of guys died because of ineptitude generalship?
He was our brigadier in Italy.
Yeah, he was a div commander.
Div commander, yeah. Hoffmeister was the brigadier.
So, and Hoffmeister was not a professional soldier.
No, he's a militiaman.
Exactly.
He was a Seaforth, right?
Right.
Yeah.
At any rate, we understood after Korea that we couldn't afford to do that again. That modern conflicts would be largely decided before we had a chance to deploy our forces, and that there would be a diplomatic cost for that. That our allies who determined the conflict in our stead would then decide where we stood at the world order, where we stood in the international trading order without us. So that in order to get a seat at the post-war table, we needed to have a military. So Canada said, okay, we're going to have the regular force.
So we couldn't just go and end up with a rank force cadre like we had at the beginning of the First and Second Wars. The skeleton upon which to flesh out mobilization. We had to have two things going with the regs now. We had to have a combat-ready, effective force ready to respond.
Ready to go, rapid reaction.
Plus a cadre around which to mobilize at the same time.
Well,
and
putting on my historian hat here, that thinking was dismissed by the 1960s.
Okay.
In the belief that there will never again be a World War II style deployment.
Okay.
Like where you've got hundreds of divisions. Like that would never ever again happen again. Yeah. The lethality at the soldier level made it so that you can impose or project the same amount of power with far fewer soldiers. Mm-hmm. In that a single F-15 has more combat power than an entire squadron of B-17s. So one individual in one machine with an air crew of 6 people has more combat power than a squadron of B-17s. It was about 900 people. So that we're not going to need these, we're not going to need a reserve footprint. We're not going to need that militia structure of, say, like 20% regular army and then an 80% reserves who we call up. Now, European countries rejected that model. They said, no, we still want that. They had that national service where everyone did their basic training for a year, returned to civilian life, and in the event of an emergency, they would be called up.
Yeah, most of them still do have. Britain UK got rid of the national service.
Yep. But most countries still had that idea where you had their standing army was essentially only a conscript army. And the reserves was, had new members every year, and you stayed in the reserve on call up until you were 50, and you had that mandatory 1 week exercise or 2 week exercise every month, blah, 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 or every year, so on and so forth. Canada rejected that. Where we said, no, we're going to do of course, conscription, national service, very, very politically touchy subject with us. Mm-hmm. And also, we never had that idea before. France has always had the conscription in the national service since the birth of the Republic. Yeah. Canada never did. Again, we always had somebody else to do our soldiering for us. And that was the rest of the world. We were safe on this isolated island in the middle of surrounded by oceans. We never had, other than the occasional skirmish with the United States.
Yeah, I was going to say war.
But the English were here, so.
Yeah,
that was a war between England and the United States.
Yeah.
It just happened to be.
No question, because Canada.
We did have.
There were colonial militias involved.
Yeah, there were, but they were a trapping. They were never effective.
They were.
No, they never were. They never could have done anything, and they were always they were kind of like what it is now. They were a coffee club. They were a gentleman's club.
All right. Was
All right.
okay. Was Brock Canadian or was he? British?
He was British. Brock was
British?
British. Isaac Brock was British, yeah.
Okay.
Now, going into the 1960s, 1970s, the idea was that we needed a professional army, not an amateur army.
Yeah.
Now, we still had the reserve structures, but that was because they were politically connected, not because anyone in the military really thought they had any value. It was because the Second World War generation was at the height of its political and economic power, in that you had all of these World War II veterans who were now, say,
Wealthy businessmen.
who were the commanders of these World War II regiments, who were, say, just in their early 60s, still very active at the height of their wealth and their business and their political connections. So the idea of saying, okay, we're going to get rid of the reserves, not going to happen. Just not going to happen, particularly with the incredible record of achievement that those reserve regiments all had just 20 years ago. It was still within the living memory. And there were still many First World War veterans alive at that point as well.
Yeah.
So it was politically, you just weren't going to get rid of the reserve regiments. But you can make them irrelevant. Like, they weren't ever a part of our national defense planning. Ever. The whole idea was, we're going to have a professional standing army. And they expanded it to 6 full battalions. And that we had the big three, the Patricias, the Royals, the Vandus, but you also had the Black Watch, the Queen's Own Rifles, and you had the Canadian Guards. You had the equivalent on the armored side, in that I think the Fort Garry Horse was a regular force unit at that time.
Yeah, 8th Canadian Sergeant.
Yeah, there's another one.
And
So there was a mirrored structure
one more French one, I think.
on the armored side. And then later on, that expanded further still with the Airborne Regiment, which was kind of like a battle group all in its own.
Well, yeah, it became the Airborne Battle Group, right?
Yeah, it was a battalion plus, actually. In fact, no, at the very beginning it was a brigade. It was a small, slightly understrength brigade, because each commando was battalion size.
But
like battalion minus.
Maybe.
The very, 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 very beginning.
Yeah, I'm not,
very beginning.
When it was in Edmonton, you mean?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. Or no, even when jump training was in Rivers, Manitoba. Yeah, it was envisioned as a big thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
it very quickly got cut down, where each commando became company size.
Yeah.
But initially, each commando had a commanding officer, and it was envisioned as a battalion. And then they were going to build parts around it. Like, you had E Battery,
Yeah.
1 RCHA as the Airborne Battery. You had a troop of engineers who were airborne. You had a service, not combat service support, but like a logistics commando.
Yeah.
That was all attached to this airborne battle group.
Yeah.
And then they brought in augmentation of reserve units who were going to throw in with all this. But anyway, that was the high water mark.
And then there was
Canadian
afterwards. Then there was 4 Mech Commando as well. That was
Yes,
actually battalion sized, right?
Yes, exactly. And so,
Because it was only existing in Germany.
yeah. And so this was in the 1960s. And then Paul Hellyer became Minister of National Defense. And the axe started swinging with the big bloodletting of 1971, when
That was unification. Right?
unification, yeah. And then we got rid of the Black Watch, we got rid of the Queen's Own, got rid of the Canadian Guards. All of these other units got brought back to reserve status. The Airborne Regiment got cut, and it came basically a single battalion size all on its own. Massive budget cuts all through the 1970s. And so the military has been in a period of constant contraction for the last 50 years, where it's constantly making do with less than what it had the year before. Less capability, fewer people.
So with that in mind, let's say up until 2001, we can look at this with 2 questions. And they both revolve around 9/11. So, up until 9/11, did the effects of these cutbacks hurt, quote unquote, hurt Canada
I would say it did. Absolutely.
Did it
Absolutely.
so did we have any effective enough force during that time, all else being equal, until 9/11, and then we had to go to, we went to war in Afghanistan, and all of a sudden, okay, we found out we were woefully unprepared structurally, numerically, so my question is actually pre 9/11 mostly, because we know that in all sorts of ways, obviously we weren't prepared for that, and then logistically. I think that the best thing that came out of 9/11 in the Afghan mission was the government was forced, finally, to kit out the troops properly.
Yeah, it was. And it was forced to get heavy lift helicopters. It was forced to get long-range transport aircraft.
Yeah.
It was forced, to bring back Chinooks and get the Globemaster. It was forced to get main battle tanks.
And on top of which, all of a sudden the troops are going around Nialis. Right? And not fucking MLs. And
exactly.
And Bombardier products.
Not a stopgap measure. They were absolutely forced to get
Hugo.
proper equipment. And they had to actually buy 50 caliber machine guns and give them to the troops. Yeah. They were forced to do this. So it did help in that regard. But you look in Korea, all through 3 rotations that we did, we had a brigade in the field, the 25th Infantry Brigade.
Okay.
What Canada did. Go ahead to Yugoslavia. We now can't do that anymore.
No.
We can only put 2 battalions in the field, or 2, battle groups in Yugoslavia.
Right, because we had
2, Combat 1.
We were even
Combat
struggling
2.
against Cyprus, right? Because they're rotating through. Sometimes, because I remember Johan van Duder telling a story about how he ended up doing 2 tours back to back in Cyprus because the airborne regiment was replaced by 1 RCHA and they didn't have a sniper platoon.
Right.
And so the airborne sniper platoon stayed over.
So, well, you're going to do back to back. Yep. We started with Combat 1, Combat 2. Found that was unsustainable. We'd only deploy a battalion at a time at the beginning of
Van Du's RCRs. And,
yes. We can only do a battalion at a time.
And
So
1, 2,
then,
3 PPCLI.
by the time we get to the end of the Afghanistan mission, we really can only kind of do a combat team.
Oh yeah, I mean halfway through the Afghan mission, and we weren't the only nation to go through this. All of a sudden, we're pulling in the Air Force MPs.
Yeah.
We're pulling in every cook who's ever taken basic training. Everybody just to rotate them through.
So we had a battalion in the field, but the company was the single biggest maneuver element. And we never, ever had the strength to actually maneuver that battalion ever. That battalion always had to provide various security elements to support the national support element. So, on paper, we had a battalion out there. In reality, our only maneuver element was never more than 2 companies. And it was always cobbled together. By the end of it, you remember, we'd have to send a company of the Patricias to go on a roto with 2 RCR, or we'd have to send a platoon of RCR, to augment a 1 VP or something like that, right? The one for sure I remember was a company of Patricias had to go augment an RCR battalion. I remember that, and there was. With the support trades, it was even worse. As you said, we were bringing in naval MPs. We were bringing in, all the support guys, like medics from we were looting every base for logisticians, traffic techs, you name it. We had to have those guys. When we sent 3rd Battalion to Louisiana a couple of years ago, we basically shut down 1 brigade to do it. The only way we could get 3rd Battalion, which was at 2/3 strength, I will point out. All companies only had 2 platoons. And one of those platoons, the equivalent of 1 platoon, was all reservists from BC. So in order to do that, two-thirds strength battalion, we basically had to loot every single vehicle from one brigade. One brigade was unable to move and do anything because everything with 4 tires on it was down supporting 3 VP. So that's it's not so much manpower or bodies, position numbers that limits our ability to deploy. It's everything else. It's how many vehicles do we have? How many supply trucks do we have? How many fuel bowsers do we have? Do we have the ability to get rations and ammo forward from RQ to CQ to the 2IC? That's a huge limiting factor for us.
Well, not just that. You had to clean out. So the rest of the base was dysfunctional
Yes.
as a result of
The rest of the entire brigade is basically on stand down because you got no trucks.
Here's
You
the
got no
interesting thing.
ambulances. You got no CPs.
Here's the interesting thing, because the way you just worded that was, do we have enough to X? Do we have enough to Y?
Yeah.
Right? So what I find a fascinating follow-up question of those statements is, did you know ahead of time if you had enough? And it sounds like the answer is no.
It's
Because
sort of.
if they did, they'd have had more of that kit hanging around so that the rest of the brigade wouldn't be.
They know that they've got enough because we can stand down the brigade to allow a unit to go X.
Okay.
Like we've got a company of 3rd Battalion up at JPMRC in Alaska right now. So we know we can make that commitment because we know that we can loot other brigades or other battalions in the brigade for vehicles and support. But we also know that, okay, well, these guys are training, these other guys, like these guys on the left hand are training, these guys on the right hand, you're going to be sitting still. You can go do a PCF cycle or something like that because you're not going anywhere. And this is the constant work of Div headquarters, is pulling the corners on this twin size sheet so we can cover the queen size bed. Right? Like what corner do we cover when? That's basically, it's allocation of scarce and insufficient resources and the balancing act, the trade-offs that we do. How can we make sure everyone gets a shot at training since we can't train simultaneously? That's why it's kind of purely academic to talk about a massive collective exercise where all the reserves go out and train together with the regular force. Well, they can't because the reserves are in the same boat. If you tried to get all of 41 Brigade to go out into the field together, they're walking. Yeah. We don't have the means. We couldn't get hay boxes out to all the troops. If we brought the entire 41 Brigade, took them out to Wainwright and did a massive collective exercise, we couldn't feed them. We don't have...
Because Service Battalion doesn't have enough...
Yeah, we don't have enough vehicles to run the hay boxes to give them a fresh feed. And we don't have enough hard rats in the system. Well, I mean, we do, but there would be no more hard rations until like Christmas. So like everything is so, how would you say? Our military is largely a Potemkin village. Largely. As it is right now. Like right now.
Well, that's okay. So now we come full circle. Because these will give me my points.
Yeah.
We've got the aggro between militia and ranks.
Yep.
We've got the lack of understanding of the reserves within civilian employment world. So that needs covering.
Yep.
But we've also got a society where recruiting is becoming an issue, and it's from what I can gather, it's become an issue to the extent that they have to alter almost the character of what it is to be a soldier, what it is to, the basic training itself, the standards that one has to live up to, and the standard one goes, the training one goes through to be able to call himself a soldier. These things have all changed in order to just recruit and pass and retain troops in in the the end of the first
Yeah.
quarter of the 21st century.
I think there's also other factors that play into it. What is the purpose of our military?
Well, that's the other thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's
Like,
the
what
task?
is it
What's
there
the mission?
for?
Yeah.
Now, do the people in the military have that same concept as the guy on the street or Parliament as a whole? And I'm going to be really, 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 really candid here at the risk of offending a lot of people. To the military, the purpose of the military is to provide really good jobs and pensions for military members. So any concept of saying, all right, we can't afford troops and equipment. Let's downsize the number of troops and we'll buy really good equipment. That would not fly. That would not fly. We are one of the highest paid armies in NATO.
Preparing potential commissionaires for lifetime income.
Yeah. We are one of the best paid armies in NATO.
Are we?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
We are handsomely paid as militaries go. A lot of militaries, the lesser lights of NATO, Canada, Belgium, Italy, some like the hangers on.
You take that back.
There's a trick that we do where nobody gets up to 2% of GDP like we're supposed to.
Okay.
The Americans will leave us alone if we get around between 1.3 and 1.5. We can get away with it.
2021, for example, was 1.32.
Rather than actually spend that money on, say, a fleet of naval vessels that is going to require a 25-year commitment from you, it's easier to simply make that 1.3 in salaries and benefits, because that's only a 3-year commitment at a time. You can easily cut your spending, even within your own governmental term, the second you think your allies are distracted by some other consideration. If you went and you bought enough Leopard 2 tanks to completely outfit the Canadian Armed Forces and its reserve component and keep them fully trained, that's a 25-year financial commitment.
Yeah.
That's a hard allocation of money. Again, we prioritize butter over guns. So if you're a country like Belgium, I think they do it too. A couple other, the small like Holland does it too. It's a lot, like not as egregious as we do, but they're in there. It's a lot easier to simply make up that 1.3, 1.5 heavily on labor costs, because that's easy to get rid of. You can easily cut back because people leave the military. They age out, and you can cut that spending easily. The second,
Yeah, that's great if you're a pencil pusher, but I mean,
diplomatically,
if one wants to look, I don't know, I was going to say altruistically, but that's a weird
say in
word.
terms of realpolitik,
Well,
in a geopolitical sense.
let's look at, if you look at pure, okay, what does Canada need for a military, right? And let's say we've committed to 2%, so let's live up to that obligation.
Okay.
Let's look at the realism of, okay, what is it we need to have, right? And instead of playing politics like that, this is what we can get away with our people. This is what we can get away with our allies.
Yeah.
But let's take that 2% number.
Okay.
Because this is what blows me away. I'm looking at this like, really, that's all Canada spends is like the highest number I'm seeing on this list. And Steve has put up a list for us here, and I'm seeing everything from 2000 to 2021. The highest number I'm seeing is 1.42.
That's percentage of GDP. Yeah.
Yeah, as percentage of
like
GDP.
you look at 2005, 2004 is 1.11.
2014 was 0.99.
24.99.
We went below 1%.
Actually,
Wow. That was during the war.
that was during the war. In fact, if you're looking at 2000 versus 2001 versus 2002 versus, it's all within a 1/100th of a percentage. All the way through 06.
I guess what that means is Trudeau's a warmonger because it's all gone up since it's
Yeah.
right. It
Well,
bottomed. That's because
he's-
2013. That's the end of the Harper administration, right?
Yep.
And so
2015.
Yeah, but he really got, or 2016, wasn't it?
2015. Ooh.
Yeah, 2015.
Why there's
Oh,
so
you're
many?
right, yes.
We
Because it's
really got
2015.
leaned on hard by our allies.
Can you
Yeah.
scroll down just a
Like,
bit, Steve? I want
that's
to see what's
also the
like
Trump
prior to
years.
2000.
Remember, after 2016, that's the Trump years,
Yeah.
where he
Holy
he
shit.
starts talking about
Yeah,
pulling the United States
You're-
out of NATO.
You're right.
So,
Because
So
I got no time for what you were just describing there. You know?
what's that?
Oh, okay. So we're gonna play games with our allies,
Like how we can game our system.
and we're gonna play games by just making it all about the staff. Like, for fuck's sake, can we take this seriously for a sec? If let's because I'm looking at 2% of GDP, and we're off by apparently the most recent number we're seeing is 1.32. So we're off by 0.68 of a percent of GDP.
yeah.
Right? And I'm betting that's not the biggest itemized line on the Canadian
Where's
budget
Sweden
in
on
any
that
given
list?
year.
Can you pan down so you see where Sweden is?
Sweden. It's not a comprehensive list, so
Yeah, I've seen them on there.
I don't really see that.
Oh, that would
I
be
have
interesting
heard
to
that
see.
Sweden is
Finland?
roughly equivalent to us.
Is
Oh,
Finland
there
up
they
there,
are.
yeah.
Sorry.
So Finland is at 5.9 billion. Oh, they're way less than us.
Sweden is at 7.89.
You consider the combat power that Finland and Sweden have compared to us.
Oh yeah. This is the thing. The thing that pisses me off is not the level of spending that we have.
Yeah,
the
it's
thing
true.
that pisses me off is
It's
the value.
how we spend
is
it,
the
yeah.
value for money we're getting. We're not. It's $26.45 billion. It's just flushed down the fucking toilet.
Yeah, but again, we have exceptionally high labor costs. Sure. The other thing is our tooth to tail ratio is one of the worst you're ever going to find.
I don't know. I'm like, you know what has exceptionally high labor costs? Volkswagen.
Yeah.
They still make cars.
They make a good product. Like we have our staff presence.
Yeah.
Like, for example, we have a division headquarters, or like we have three. We've got one Canadian division is simply a full division headquarters, but that's CJOC. It's our deployed. Whoever's deployed is technically one div. That's why they just call it CJOC. But that's really what it is. It's a divisional headquarters. So we send basically, we've got a battle group in Latvia.
Yeah.
We've got a company for op impact in the Middle East, around Al-Assad in Jordan and Kuwait. And then we've got about a company for Unifier. I'm a company plus, maybe two companies in the UK and Poland for Unifier. And so that needs a division headquarters.
Yeah, I mean, we already know we're top heavy. We're talking
Totally
about
top
NDHQ.
And then
Right,
we've
so-
got
Yeah,
NDHQ is a whole nother, like, essentially like two divisional headquarters. We've got 5 division, which is essentially it's a reserve formation. 4 div loans, I think, to RCR, like basically loans the units in Gagetown.
It's a 5 div.
Yeah, they're essentially loaned, like they are attached for administration, OpCon, to 5 div, but it's basically a reserve division. Like, because the other divisions at least have a mechanized battle group, right? They've at least got a CMBG in them, but not 5 div. They've just got Gagetown. And within each, like say 3 div or 4 div, you've got one mechanized brigade, which is a brigade minus, because the 3rd battalion in each of these brigades is not mechanized, it's light. And they really don't know what to do with it. They really don't know how to incorporate it into the mechanized brigade. And so Canada's been working for 12 years now, I think 12, maybe 10, 12, on the light infantry battalion concept. And we still haven't nailed down what we want to do with light formations. I mean, doctrinally, if Canada could, we'd get rid of light altogether. We would rather do medium mechanized forces across the board. That's what we want to do. We really don't like institutionally, Canada's military does not like the idea of light forces. They're just too difficult for us to wrap our heads around
Well, I
and
mean,
work with.
there you've hit the nail on the head, right? Like, and this is part of our society all around. You know, just any unimaginative organization. We want the simple solution. We don't want the actual solution.
Yeah.
Right. Just,
And so then-
you need something simple to work with. And
So when you've got what is essentially a single brigade, why do we have a division headquarters for it? Like, don't tell me 41 Brigade, 39 Brigade, and
38 Brigade.
38 Brigade are actual brigades. They're not.
No.
Just like 32, 34, and 37 out east. They're not. They are at the most, if you put everybody together, everybody at the most, battalion minus.
But here's where my mind's going with this. Like, in its own perverse way, having all these headquarters with all these generals and these head shits,
Yep.
you know, NDHQ.
Yep.
Because how did you put it when you're talking about the diehards? You called them
The Kool-Aid drinkers.
the Kool-Aid drinkers.
Yep.
Right. When it comes to professional military officer class,
Yep.
the general class,
Yep.
you kind of got to give them somewhere to go, just so that we have that. Now, does that mean we need that many?
Yeah, that's
I
true.
don't know, right? But if the ones at the top aren't retiring out or mustering out early enough, you know, where do the bright young things below them go if they can't go up, right? Right. So that's, and I'm not justifying it by
Maybe,
any stretch
you know,
of the imagination.
Maybe that's one way you could look at it, I suppose.
I've been wanting to go for a smoke for a while. You got a carry on that?
So
I was gonna go for a smoke before we started.
before we started, that's right. Yeah, you've been holding out. So, you know, there's that aspect of it. Like, we're really, 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 really top heavy. It's kind of, yeah, we don't, I don't think we get value for our money at all. No. Not even close. Because with 20, I mean, look at what Finland does with 1/5 of our budget.
Where are they? Yeah.
5.9. Okay, so like, a quarter of our budget.
Norway's 8.25. They're
Yeah.
they're a NATO ally. Finland's not in NATO yet.
But Finland's got a lot of combat power.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. Sweden's at 8 billion, just under 8 billion.
Yeah. And Sweden kind of gutted their military, but they are rapidly trying to rebuild right now. Like, they went hard into the peace dividend.
Yeah.
But right now, like, any attempt to increase Canada's, to get value for that money, you're going to get fought tooth and nail by our military itself, because they like having all of those. Like, let's say you're a bright young captain.
What does a Reg Force warrant officer make now?
About 90.
Yeah.
Yeah, about 90.
Yeah, he wouldn't be happy if you told him he had to make 60.
No, he wouldn't. No,
Right?
he wouldn't.
Isn't there corporals who do 60
They
now?
just last week they redid post living differential. So like the extra allowances you get based on
based on where you are.
yeah, basically where you are, they've redone those. And I don't know the exact details of it. I haven't read it because it doesn't apply to me. But I know a lot of people are taking a cut.
Oh yeah.
And they are not happy. Like, a lot of people are saying, fuck this, I'm getting out. Mind you hear that all the time.
Yeah.
You say, we're out of coffee. Fuck this, I'm getting out. That's like, people make that threat all the time, and yet here we are. But again, a big part of your salary is...
Well, the thing is, you come to count on that money. Right?
Yeah.
Like, it's
A lot of it is as PLD and we just call it field overnight allowance. What is it now?
field operation allowance.
Is it FOA? No, it's not FOA anymore.
Oh,
But it's the bonus you get for being in a technically a field unit.
right.
LDA,
Oh, well.
land duty allowance, and that's another thing that is such a scam, because I know people in one field am who have been collecting LDA for 10 years and have never left the base.
Right.
Ever. Because, well, technically they're in a field unit, so they collect that pay. And it's a hefty pay. Like, when Reg Force guys get posted to that's one of the reasons why they hate going to the schools.
They lose their LD.
Because they lose LDA. You only get LDA when you're in the battalions. And
Right.
it's a couple $1,000 a month. Like,
Right, yeah.
it adds up, man.
I remember,
It adds up.
because I remember, like, when I worked at Trican, I quickly, within my first year being there, I became a trainer.
Mm-hmm.
And they called us mentors. And that was $700 a month.
Yeah.
And then they said, nah, everybody's a trainer. You guys who are for
Yeah.
now, you guys who are we're currently giving you $700 a month for, because we were the only people
Yeah.
who could like certify other people as qualified for their job.
Yeah.
You're still the only people who are
Yeah.
qualified
Yeah.
to certify others for their job.
But we expect you
But-
to do it for nothing now.
But now you're doing it for nothing, and
Yeah.
everybody else can train.
yeah.
So I'm like,
Yeah.
all right, well, I'm not no passengers in my truck anymore then.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm not doing that. Yeah. Yeah, spend $1 to save a dime.
Yeah.
But at any rate, like these are. Let me ask you a question. Say the balloon goes up and China attacks Taiwan.
Okay.
We're not going to that party.
Yeah, let's say we're not going to that party.
Well, we're not. We have no way to get there.
What's the consequences? Let's say America, Korea, Japan, Australia, and the Philippines, and Taiwan itself all pony up big. And they win. And now China is no longer a threat to the post-war world order. It is rehabilitated and a friendly nation, a friendly trading nation. Yeah, there's going to be some war damage to rebuild in China and in Taiwan, and maybe even Japan and South Korea as well. But we are now in a peaceful, like it's like 1946 all over again, minus Stalin. And that we've got, like again, China is no longer a hostile nation. They've had, like we won, we've gotten rid of the Communist Party. We now have a friendly regime in there. Everybody now wants to work together and be cooperative.
And the capital of China is moving from Taipei to back to Beijing or
yeah,
Shanghai
whatever,
or something.
whatever. And maybe Taiwan's still independent, whatever. Yeah. But everyone's friendly now, and everyone's working together. But there were a grievous price was paid. What are the consequences? What does that new world order look like? Where does Canada sit in that? When the trade deals are made and the new alignments of how international decisions are made and questions are answered, what tables will Canada have a seat at? What tables will they not?
Well, I'm going to rewind your original
Okay.
question because I don't quite see it happening that way. I find it, I guess I find it a bit telling that your original statement, the balloon goes up. Well, the balloon goes up means a particular thing, right?
Well, I mean,
but
war. Like
the end
full
game,
out war.
the end game you describe does not involve the mushroom balloons going
Okay,
up.
no mushroom balloon, but full-fledged conventional war on the style of Russia, Ukraine.
So, if you're looking at, see, the challenge I find looking at that end game is, if you're China and you end up losing, do you not go to the nukes?
So let's say they tried. Let's say they tried and they were prevented by whatever reason.
Okay. I don't know, because I have to admit that for the first time, and this is without even going to China, but if we throw Taiwan into the mix, because we have no idea what's going to happen.
I'm just saying, like the first major war, and like let's say there's a revolution within China at the same time, and let's say that the CCP tries to go nuke, and the People's Revolutionary Army refuses to launch.
Okay.
Right?
Whatever.
So whatever scenario you want, but there's a major war. It's a very costly, in terms of blood and treasure, conventional war. But now it is over. But Canada did not participate in a meaningful way. What are the consequences?
I mean, I think I'm going to put meaningful in air quotes here, right? Because
let's say we didn't participate at all.
We couldn't.
Let's say we sat it out.
We have no way to get there.
right, but that doesn't mean we're not
There's no lift capacity to get us there.
Like
right. And
let's ask the
logistically
question,
or operationally,
do
is there
we need an army? No one's invading us. No one is ever going to invade us. Ever. So long as the United States exists as a coherent military force, no one is invading Canada.
No, but again, we have to.
What's that?
Except maybe the United States.
Yeah, except for the United
Except for
States.
the United States. But no, but we have to pay the piper, as you said, right?
Do we?
Well,
Do we need a
NATO,
military?
We have to show that
Why?
we've got.
Well, I'm going to be devil's advocate here. You prove me wrong. Why don't we just shut down the whole military
You have
completely?
to stop interrupting me and allow me to finish the sentence.
Ah,
once in a
but
while, dude.
I want you to look at it a different way.
No, I'm saying
Why do we need a military at all?
because under the New World Order that has existed since, let's say,
Since Hulk Hogan.
since the
Oh, sorry,
60s.
wrong world order.
since the 60s, anyways, right? At the time it was UN, and Canada contributed a lot to that. So, who can be trusted to go into the Sinai and get between the Israelis and the Egyptians?
Yeah.
Right? It's
Swiss.
the Canadians, right?
The Swiss.
Yeah, but the Swiss weren't there.
Swiss
Right?
didn't want
It was Canada was a significant contributor in a very prominent way to UN peacekeeping. Right?
Swedes could have gone. They probably didn't. They didn't go.
They did go on peacekeeping mission. They did. They did some shit in the Congo.
Yeah. Well, you ever see that movie, the Seas of Jadado?
Yeah, and the Republic of Ireland, yeah.
Yeah, and the Swedes were the air element.
Well, the Swedes were the what?
The air element. They were providing.
Right, that's right. Yes.
Swedish helicopters and stuff, yeah.
Yes.
But I don't see participation, like operational participation in any war out there. Maybe we're there in the background, logistics, something like that. Who knows, right? Maybe we do like we did in Korea. We've got troops that are fed in wherever, right? I don't see...
Well, Korea was a massive contribution. Like, we were an entire brigade all on our own in the Commonwealth Infantry Division.
Right.
And we had a massive presence in Korea.
Right. So, I mean,
massive by our
maybe
standards.
maybe we can end up doing that.
By any stretch. Like, Britain had 2 brigades in that. The Australians and the New Zealanders contributed to... They had a battalion in one of the British brigades. They also contributed to the brigade artillery.
Right.
But Canada's contribution was bigger than I think any other...
Other than Britain.
Like, say, Turkey,
Yeah.
Holland, like all the other... Yeah, it was, number 1 was the United States, or number 1 was South Korea. Obviously, it was their country.
Yeah.
Number 2 was the United States. And that was huge gulf. Number 3, like a massive difference between 2 and 3. 3 was Britain.
Yeah.
And then 4 was Canada.
Right.
So, yeah, Canada had a very, very robust presence. Like an absolute difference maker in Korea. Were we a difference maker since then?
I don't know. I'm going to throw a bunch of things out here at this point, right? First of all, I think based on the conversation we've just been through in the last however long it's been today, right? I think there is a need for us to have a military of some sort.
Why?
Because should the need for a military come up, whatever that need is, and we need to figure out what that need is, right? At least we've got it, right?
Okay,
so that when we talk about something like how we were unprepared, or we need to be prepared compared to the First and Second Wars, we can't just mobilize. We need to be able to react, and then up our game from there, right? That's why we need it. We need that professional force because I think a society kind of needs that. Now, a lot of that is impacted by our foreign policy and the foreign policy of our allies and whatever world order is going on at any given time, right? But I think really broad strokes answer, I think, yes, we need one, right? Right now, we don't know what that need is or how it should be defined, right? And we may not, or may not have good minds thinking about this well at the moment, right? And I think as we all agree, it's, the 26 billion or whatever it is not necessarily being administered well.
I think we're paying a lot of lip service. And we're gaming our allies.
So
We don't really want a military, but diplomatically we feel we kind of got to make it look like we have one.
Yeah, but the good news is, in a lot of ways, a lot of the troops that are in the military, they want to be there. So it doesn't matter if the government doesn't want the military, and if they're only paying lip service because the troops
army.
are.
The troops on the ground do want to be there. Yes.
In answer to your question about what happens in the hypothetical about Taiwan, I don't see it change that much. First of all, I'll say that even were China to lose in this hypothetical scenario, I do not necessarily see the CCP as being out of power. I just see a regime change within the CCP.
Let's not get hung up on, say, a specific scenario.
Right. Okay.
Let's say it's just a generic war
Yeah.
that is resolved,
Yeah.
but at a very high price.
Yeah.
And so now the victors are reshaping that post-war order. Now, let's ask, okay, after World War II, Was there a consequence to South America economically? Did they pay any kind of price for sitting that one out in terms of diplomacy, economics, access to the Bretton Woods Agreement, to trade blocks, or was there any sort of consequence for them? I don't know, to be honest.
No, I think technically a bunch of them jumped on board in 45, maybe. I think Brazil joined the war at some point.
Yeah, but it was
meaningless. Be that as it may, for Canada in particular, I think it's counterintuitive to say that simply because we can't be there operationally.
South America remains much poorer than North America, obviously, much poorer than it should by resource and its technological means available to it. Like it should be doing better than it is. It's had a lot of issues with politics.
Yeah, it has. Corruption
and stuff like that. So
well, it's
not in the shape it could be in, and I don't know how much of that comes from a lack of participation in the Second World War.
Maybe.
I don't think any of it. I think whether they participate or not, the same issues would be in place. I think geographically,
I think they would have stronger connections with the rest of the world if they had been involved. A lot of that post-world order was built on the strong connection, social connections that were forged. Like, say, look at the connection between Australia and America that was forged because of the Second World War.
True.
Imagine if, say, Germany had invaded Brazil, and America had been involved in South America. Imagine that relationship that would be between, say, Argentina and Chile and America, had they been in a similar situation. I don't know. Maybe that's a poor analogy, but it did. I think now that I'm thinking about this for the first time, and I do stand to be corrected because I'm pretty ignorant on South American history. They seem kind of isolated from international networks.
Well, I think in a lot of ways they had been isolated from world events in that respect, right? Through both wars.
Yeah.
Now that you mention it, because I was going to say, well, Africa, right?
I was actually,
but I mean, a lot of
was involved.
But Africa was all colonial.
Thinking of this, I don't know if it's true. I suppose I should Google it, but it seems like South Africa is a more prosperous country than Argentina.
Yeah,
but I don't know what the numbers are domestically.
I don't know about that right
Hard to
now.
say.
I think South Africa's in a bad way again.
Yeah, they are now.
But that's only recently. But say in 1980, what was GDP between Argentina and South Africa? What it would
actually 1980 would be interesting to find out.
Yeah,
I mean the Argentines may have been suffering at that point. Now. Yeah. Comparing apartheid South Africa, I think those numbers are going to be a bit skewed.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
But
it would be.
Apartheid wouldn't have helped South Africa like Argentina.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah, they would have held it back. It did. Obviously, it did hold South Africa back.
Yeah. So GDP 89. I'm assuming this is in U.S. dollars.
So This is who?
89,400.
South Africa, 6.6% growth. Good God! Oh, that's an outlier.
Yeah,
but mind you, still pretty robust growth through the.
Yeah, there was a 77 was a bad year, but generally pretty reasonable, robust growth from the 60s up to
this is South Africa?
Yeah, this is South Africa.
Okay, so I'm going to argue that it's any way you look at it, because then you have to start looking at policies, and policies under apartheid may not be the most progressive, right?
Yeah, but don't you think that would have cost them? Because I know
it would have cost them from some of the economic embargoes that were placed on them.
And Thomas Sowell has got a lot of material on how apartheid, by restricting, by what is these labor laws, saying you're not allowed to hire whoever you want for this trade. You can only hire whites for these trades.
Yeah,
it definitely held back South Africa's growth, and that there was a lot of companies simply tried to. Or they just ignored these laws and spent a great deal on bribes to avoid enforcement of it, simply because they needed to expand their workforce.
Yeah, but
guys working in the more remote areas.
You're also going to have I mean,
Apartheid absolutely held back their economy.
under racist policies, you're going to have a lot of disenfranchised people who are being paid very low wages,
Yeah.
very few
Yeah.
rights.
Yeah.
Right?
And
So
that
there's
hurts your economy.
Well, no, because the companies are making more money that way. Now, how that translates throughout the economy,
Exactly.
I don't know. It depends
Exactly.
on taxation levels and
Exactly.
stuff like that.
You
right?
don't have people consuming the products of those companies.
Well,
And you can't export because you're under sanction.
to a certain extent, but I mean, what do you had gold and you had diamonds.
Yep.
All right, so there's always a market for that. Right, and again, I can't go into specifics.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I can't remember what all the embargoes were,
But they had a very robust manufacturing sector.
They had to because of the embargoes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was very advanced.
But
And
it's interesting.
That exploded. Well, when did apartheid go? When was that gone?
91, I think.
Okay, so who's this you got up there right now? Okay, so 91.
Right now we're looking at South Africa's.
Okay,
so it's interesting because Argentina had a really good 1980.
Is this Argentina? Okay,
This is Argentina. But their growth, so they had really robust growth. 79 was 70%, but then they were negative.
Negative 3.
And they're so if you compare
so
their
they
growth,
are all about the boom and the bust.
yeah, and it's very close cycles.
Like look at
Right.
1969, 16% growth. 1970 negative.
Yeah,
1980 or was it
Yeah, so this is-
67,
so this is GDP per
huge
capita.
crash. They start climbing out in 68, 69, 79 they crash again.
and 1980, look at 1980s, 233,
Those are goofy numbers. Look at 1973.
48.8%.
Those are goofy numbers.
Yeah,
So
you go back.
obviously this is an economy in chaos.
yeah.
Well, hang on. So what's their overall GDP? So maybe we shouldn't look at percentages. Let's look at actual
So
numbers.
overall GDP, right? Like that's the number, the raw number there, right?
Yeah.
So big time, big year.
Massive, yeah, big year.
In
So that's
19
obviously like a huge outlier.
Yeah, in 1980.
And then it all went to shit by 82, 83 after the Falklands loss.
Yeah.
Yeah, like,
So
okay,
South
that's
Africa.
false.
So South Africa's numbers are lower.
Yeah.
Now I don't know what the population compares at the time, but the numbers are lower. But their growth is more consistent.
Consistent, yeah.
And
Definitely more consistent.
yeah.
But getting back to so South America, I would argue, and
So
this
maybe
is-
they're not a great comparison.
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe not.
This is how I think it ties into the Canadian question regarding the Taiwan War, hypothetically, right? I think geographically, South America is probably the one place on the planet that simply was not impacted by the Second War. Like maybe a little bit, but
Yeah,
you know,
like
basically
they-
it was
yeah.
There were
geographically
very few
isolated.
direct impacts, like
mean-
other than the Battle of the River Platte. and
Yeah,
stuff like
yeah,
that. Very
exactly.
little
And
military actions.
there was warfare off the South American coast.
Yeah.
Like extensive naval warfare.
Yeah, but
But they weren't
extensive compared to
They
what?
weren't participants.
No.
Right? So I don't think overall it impacted them.
Would have made a
yea or
difference,
nay.
though, if the South American navies had participated on the Allied side and denied that
In
those
anti-submarine
littoral waters.
warfare.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Possibly,
But they've-
but I don't think they paid a price. It wasn't an imperative to bring them on board.
Yeah, that would I could very easily see that argument from the South American perspective being the juice ain't worth the squeeze on that
I
one.
can see that. Yeah,
Right? Like the casualties you're going to take, your
Yep.
fleets are kind of antiquated. So unless the Americans are going to give you a whole whack of ships, you know, with modern sonars, because you're conducting essentially an anti-submarine warfare campaign.
Yep.
And if your navy isn't up to the task, which their navies probably weren't, right? You know, they spent a lot of money. South Americans in the interwar period spent a lot of money on big capital ships to use to like intimidate their neighbors.
Yep. Okay. Did Sweden or Switzerland pay a price for not being a part of the Allied effort?
Not at all.
I don't think so.
Not at all. Yeah, I can't really see that.
Well, in Switzerland, I think Switzerland was more useful, even during the war, probably
Just as it was.
doing
Okay.
what they did, right? Acting as probably as a conduit
Yep.
for both
So,
sides.
can we think of any example where a country paid a price for not being part of an allied coalition, or for doing everything it could to sit out of a war?
Yeah, like,
Did Denmark and
like-
Holland pay
well,
a
I mean,
price
did
for
we-
sitting out of the First World War?
did we
No.
pay a price for not going to Vietnam? right? Australians went to Vietnam.
Yep, that's right.
South Koreans went to
That's
Vietnam.
right.
Yeah, but Britain didn't.
Britain didn't? Yeah, but Britain was already heavily engaged in Malaya.
Yeah.
So they were already fighting a communist insurgency in Malaya. So they had an excuse.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I question the use of the term heavily
Well,
compared to the American
not
involvement.
just Malaya, but they were involved in a series of brush fire wars, like in Aden.
Yeah, they were in Aden at the
They
time.
were heavily engaged,
they were busy
or like
in Africa.
heavily engaged in several places all at once. Northern Ireland troubles were just starting. They were engaged in Malaya. They were engaged in Aden. They were engaged in Africa.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know if Britain had the capacity to give anything.
But I don't think they want to be there either, right?
No,
I mean,
no,
they'd already
yeah, they
done
definitely
their.
didn't want to.
They definitely done their part in the late 40s.
Yeah. And so they had, diplomatically, they had pretty good grounds for saying to the United States, we can't participate with you in Vietnam. But Steve's question, did Canada pay a diplomatic, international, or economic price for not participating in Vietnam or the Iraq War?
Iraq too.
Both.
No,
One
we were part of Desert Shield. Desert
We
Storm.
were
Symbolically.
as
we had aircraft. We had attack
as
aircraft.
Binns put it.
Symbolically.
As Binns put it, if the front line in Gulf War I is in Winnipeg, the closest Canadians were in Phoenix.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's exactly how the geography works.
Well, because what we had was naval and air assets, was it not?
We did have like
There was a
signals.
There was a company RCR to secure the airfield,
Yeah.
or to help secure the
Yeah.
King Khalid or whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
And we did
There
have
was some-
a SIGs. We did have a SIGs relay.
yeah, and I
Our-
think one or two frigates
Yeah.
frigates in the Gulf was
Yeah.
part of the battle group.
Yeah, exactly.
I thought we had air assets. I thought we had some Hornets.
No, we did. We did have Hornets, but they couldn't drop. They couldn't go any combat support missions
Yeah,
because they couldn't drop the ordnance.
yeah.
They weren't compatible with the ordnance.
That was available, and we didn't have any ordnance of our own.
They could only drop dumb bombs. They couldn't drop. They couldn't drop.
Yeah.
What's Ed Harris's line? Tell me this isn't a government operation. Yeah. For fuck's sake, really? Okay.
So I think all they did was fly combat air patrols like over the Gulf
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I thought one of them engaged an Iraqi ship in the
Yeah,
Gulf.
they-
Yeah, I did,
one of
but
the-
he
he
used
engaged
an
it with-
air-to-air missile for that or something.
I think he uses
Or-
cannon.
Yeah, just cannon.
maybe,
yeah.
Yeah, no, he uses cannon. Yeah.
Yeah, and he violated the ROEs to do it. And
Yeah.
that was a career ender for that guy. So,
Yeah.
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 Well, I mean, hopefully he's got free drinks for life out of it. So.
Yeah, he's the only Canadian to fire a shot in anger in the
Yeah,
Gulf War.
yeah, probably the only one. But yeah,
Did we pay a price for Vietnam? I don't think so.
yeah,
Right?
I
I don't think we did either.
don't see as we did.
Because there are plenty of countries that did not, and that was. I was going to say
But
that
we
wasn't
were-
even a war; it was a police action.
We
No,
were
but Korea was
as
a police
a
action.
war.
Korea was.
They were
police action.
wars. Real bullets, two-way ranges. They were wars.
Yeah.
But that was
Tanks.
that
was
an
there
American
any
thing.
other major American ally on par with Canada that sat out? Because again, Korea was in. I think Japan wanted to contribute to Korea, but the Americans said no.
Yeah, no, there'd be a lot of bad blood there at that point. Yeah.
because the Koreans and the Japanese
Good-
did
did
not.
not
No,
get along.
Japan was still an occupied nation at the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but they desperately wanted good relations with the United States.
yeah.
France wasn't in Korea. No, sorry, France wasn't in Vietnam.
Oh, they were
France
in
was
Vietnam.
very much
They-
in
they-
Vietnam.
they were very much-
Vietnam.
okay.
The Americans replaced
Yeah,
the French.
Yeah, exactly.
France was in Vietnam before that. But
Yeah.
once the Americans came in, France was not.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
they were engaged in Algeria
Yeah.
during the late 60s.
Yeah. No, the
not,
French.
not late 60s.
They didn't have. I mean, that's one of the reasons why they
but
had
they
to
weren't going
get
to go
out
back.
of Vietnam.
They weren't going to go back to Vietnam because
Yeah.
they just
Yeah,
decolonized.
that was one of the
it,
reasons
right?
why they had to get out of Vietnam, is because they couldn't do Algeria and Vietnam at the same time. They
Yeah.
just didn't have the resources, and Algeria was the higher priority.
Yeah, but wasn't that the Algerian sellout was like no later than 62, if I'm not mistaken.
Wasn't it later, like 68?
I don't
With the
think
Pied
so.
Noir and those guys? I could be wrong, but at any rate, France was exhausted.
Yeah.
They had nothing left.
Yeah, but
the
you're
colonialism,
talking about-
colonialism had drained them.
You're
Yeah,
talking
sure.
about the major allies.
Yeah.
Again, you can't use Vietnam's not a good yardstick for this.
Well, what I'm just saying that I don't think Canada paid a price at all.
They shouldn't have.
The Pacific,
I mean-
it is a Pacific allies. Like the Australians sent
the
a brigade.
Australians were
Yeah,
in.
but
The
the Aus-
Koreans were in big time.
Yeah.
The Australians
The
saw
Koreans, I think, sent a
themselves-
division. Australia.
Yeah, like they had a major presence.
Yeah, and the Australians sent a
Australians had
brigade,
major
at least a
presence.
brigade,
Yeah.
if not a division.
But, Canada was a very prominent American ally. We sat that one out.
Yeah, and a
I don't
Pacific
think
ally, right?
There was any consequence at all.
No.
They shouldn't have been because it was a
Should
questionable
or shouldn't.
war.
Doesn't matter.
Right?
It wasn't,
There wasn't.
it wasn't so questionable at the time.
I mean, it was.
I mean,
to
okay,
it was
you
very
want-
important to the United States.
Like at the beginning.
And there was absolutely, if Canada had said, "Hey, we're going to contribute to this," we would have been welcomed with open arms. And I don't have any document on this, but I am willing to lay money on it that the Americans absolutely asked Canada to contribute,
Yeah.
Sure they
and
did.
we chose not to. And I don't think there
who would
was
have been
any-
prime minister? Because we're talking like starting at the beginning of
would that
major
have been-
American
it would have
involvement
been
in like
Pearson.
65, 66.
Yeah.
Pearson.
Right, and so the war wasn't seen like very much like the domino theory was very much in effect. It wasn't. It wasn't
Yeah, exactly.
basically the real downfall of popularity of the Vietnam War came after Tet, right?
you're right.
Which was 68.
68, yeah.
Right, so that those previous couple of years,
Yeah, so you got 4 years.
It was a holy cause kind
Yeah.
of thing, right? Like,
Yeah, it was seen as a worthwhile thing of doing.
yeah,
For
despite the
whom?
fact that
Well, for the Americans.
the
Americans
talking-
thought it was
Which
important.
Americans?
Well,
Right? The mere
the
fact.
Johnson administration.
Okay, they weren't getting the volunteers they needed
No.
to go.
Nope.
They had to go to a draft.
well, they had
And
they
they
never
were
got rid of
drafting-
They always had a
They'd never
conscript
gotten rid
army.
of the draft.
Yeah, they always had the draft.
Yeah.
They just came to rely on it more and more and more
Yeah.
and more as the war went on.
When you talk about people who pay a price,
Yeah.
we're going to Vietnam.
Yeah.
No one paid a higher price than the United States
Sure.
of America.
No, I agree with
Right?
you. No,
And that's-
I'm
and
not,
that's
I'm
why-
not arguing with you
and
on that.
that's
I'm
why I
not
say-
trying to argue that Vietnam was a just war.
Right.
I'm just saying it's irrelevant. That my question is, Canada resisted that diplomatic pressure to participate.
Yeah.
Was there a downside to that? And I don't see one.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think
and
there was.
I don't think there was a downside to Iraq too.
I don't think.
And there shouldn't have
yeah.
been. And in fact, I'll say this.
Yeah, but we went to Afghanistan.
We did.
And
We
the
did
American,
go to
And
Afghanistan.
the Americans were aware of our capabilities and are, I think, aware of our capabilities or lack thereof.
we went to Afghanistan simply because from everything I have read, we did go to Afghanistan because our diplomatic relationship
politics,
with the United States was in tatters.
It was political. It was for political
It was
reasons.
a political involvement.
Yeah.
We desperately needed to get back in America's good books.
Yeah,
And that was primarily an outlaw or an extension of trade policy.
yeah.
We were so dependent upon the American economy more than ever that said, look, we need to have a very friendly administration in Washington.
Mm-hmm.
This is the way to do it.
Well, I mean, and I think domestically it was an easy sell. I mean,
Yeah.
And plus, it was
Yeah.
you could even sell
It
under
was
the
seen
auspices
as
of
a
NATO.
just war.
Yeah.
After 9/11, it was seen as a just war.
I think virtually all of NATO went into Afghanistan after
Yeah,
9/11,
yeah.
right?
And
So-
even non-NATO, like Sweden was in there.
Yeah.
Sweden was in there. I remember reading an article. I can't find any record of what they did, but I remember an article that Serbia wanted to send a battalion to Afghanistan.
That wouldn't have complicated anything.
Well, if you want guys who are used to fighting Muslims in the hills,
Well, I mean, you'd be surprised who was in Iraq. Like
Yeah.
the southern section. So the Brits had the very south of the country
Yeah.
around
Basra,
around
yeah.
Basra.
Yeah.
North of them was basically the ex-Warsaw Pact, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I went.
Czechs.
Romania was in there. weren't they?
Romania's were
Yeah.
in there.
Yeah.
Freaking Azerbaijan was there.
No way.
Yeah.
Holy
it's
shit.
scary. They're scary freaking people. Like we went
yeah?
because we went to Al Qut
Yeah.
one time.
Not all of them, disclaimer, folks. Not all Azerbaijani are scary.
No, but I mean,
Just
like,
most of them.
but
many of the
Aziris
ones
and
Steve knew.
there was another one that stands there. But we get these guys. We go to Al Qut,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like there's all these guys walking around. I'm like, these guys look just like Mongols, but they're all 6'5".
Oh yeah.
Like and
Big dudes.
And carrying
big,
AKs.
carrying
Yeah,
AKs, and like,
yeah.
holy crap! I don't know who these guys are, but do not mess with them, whatever they are.
yeah.
Like, because you know, like an average Mongol is like
Yeah.
a 5'4", 5'5".
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
pretty small. These guys were 6'5".
Like they brought
Right?
the basketball team.
Yeah.
Now,
Well,
were
not the
they-
basketball team, like the starting, the defensive line for whatever. Like
like the rugby team.
yeah, yeah.
So these are the guys that face the All Blacks. Now,
And then
Were they pretty, like, were they effective militarily?
I don't know.
Or did they just hunker down in their camps and not give a fuck?
I don't really know. I don't know what they were, how much. It was a pretty peaceful sector anyway. That section of Iraq was pretty. They were in southeastern, so they were, I think their sector bordered with Iran. So it was probably, but they weren't getting engaged a lot, I think.
Right.
And then over across the other side of the MSR in Dawanya, there was a Polish battalion there. There was a company. I think it was just a company of El Salvadorans,
Oh, yeah.
and they were like. They had been gifted all their equipment by the Americans because they were
yeah.
wearing like brand new.
Yeah, they were all American, everything.
Yeah, brand new M80 Woodland. So they didn't even give them desert; they gave them Woodland.
Yep.
They all had brand new M16A2s.
Yep.
And they were ricocheting around in Chevy pickups that they
No way.
had flak vests draped over the boxes, right? So they ever
Oh my god!
like it was they were poor off.
That
And we
was
would, and the only reason I knew
that's low budget.
and the only reason I knew they were there is because they would always stop. We would when we pushed forward out of Cedar with a fuel convoy, we'd stop at this place called Scania, which was just outside Dawanya, but on the highway. And they would turn up at Scania to go in, and Scania was a fuel station. The MWR was a tent. It was a small tent, like it was like 4 sections of mod, right? Like and this was getting out for them, was going to Scania, right? Like you went to the MWR on Biap. I mean, there was like 3 different ones, and they're all the size of like the big golf dome on the south side of the city, right? Like they were massive, right? You know, gyms and phone banks and computer banks and lounges and stuff like that. This was a tent. There was like
4 sections of mod.
it was literally like 4 sections of mod, their tentage. There was one, I think, a 27-inch TV that got
What
in.
does MWR mean?
Morale, Welfare, and Recreation Facility.
Gotcha,
MWR.
Gotcha. Sorry. I thought you meant like N, like as in neo or new or
No,
November.
M as in Mike.
Gotcha.
Sorry. But yeah, so it's just like there's all kinds of people got conned into Iraq too. Like, just because I mean, what are the freaking hell cells doing here?
Yeah,
right? Like,
that's crazy.
Well, that I was going to say, because in 2003, I was just getting out. If the regs had come to us and said, we need Trent to go to Afghanistan, Trent would have gone to Afghanistan.
Sure.
If the regs had come and said, or if the government had said, we're going to Iraq, and the regs had come and said, Trent needs to go to Iraq, Trent would have gone to Iraq. Right? I'm very happy that Chrétien kept Canada out of Iraq. We didn't belong there. No, it shouldn't have happened.
Yeah, it shouldn't have happened. It was in retrospect, I think we can say that it was an unnecessary mission. And a lot of people lost their lives for pretty much nothing.
Yeah. So, and again, no disrespect
We
to
probably
those
would've gotten
who
yeah.
served
anyway.
and lost.
And who laid everything on the line for exactly.
Because
they were doing what they thought was right at the time.
Well, they were doing what they were told to. I mean, that's the mission they were given.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
And they lived up to it, right?
If
So
you're a
I don't
professional,
fault them for that.
If you're a professional, like what's the phrase? Ours is not the reason why. Ours is about to do or die.
Yeah.
Right? They were professionals.
Yeah.
As a professional, you put your faith in the civilian leadership.
Exactly.
That they will not lead you astray.
Yeah.
And when you sign on that line and you take, now the king's shilling, you say, like what's the phrase? You sign a check for unlimited liability.
Yeah.
And you must have faith that the civilian process is sending you in harm's way for a just mission.
Yeah.
But while they're debating that, you prosecute that mission to the very best of your ability.
Yeah.
The
Exactly.
failure in a place like Vietnam or Iraq is not those who served. The failure was in the civilian leadership.
Absolutely.
But that said,
there's certainly in Vietnam and even in Iraq too. There was failure in upper echelons of
it's
military
true.
leadership. Yeah.
In the prosecution of the mission.
But
not going on the mission itself.
Yeah, no.
Right?
So tactically, just as Vietnam, even Afghanistan, Iraq, tactically they were very well fought. Strategically, they were shit shows. They were disasters.
I don't think the Americans have ever really learned how to do a counterinsurgency.
No.
I don't think they ever really have.
I remember when in my second job over there when Binns was there as my boss there.
Yeah.
He came down one day and he's like, here's the new plan, or he just heard about, I think it was just after Petraeus took over as commander-in-chief in Iraq. And he was like, somebody should point out to the guy that if you're changing the strategy every 6 months, you don't have a strategy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you don't have a strategy. It's
And,
called
Petraeus
ad hoc.
was like the god, the
Yeah, that's right.
counterinsurgency
Yeah,
god.
he was, yeah.
Right, and he
Yeah.
he still didn't.
So this brings me back to my then question. We've tried to think of an example where a country sat out a major conflict and came back afterwards and said, okay, that in retrospect was a mistake. We should have got involved. So then Canada, given that it is bordered on 3 sides by oceans, 1 side by a friendly ally who nobody is going to fuck with, do we need an army? Let me preface this. Under our current outlook and foreign policy and our domestic policy, where we say, okay, you know what? We are going to be a essentially isolationist little country where we have little involvement with the rest of the world and we put all our economic eggs into the North American basket. We don't need a military. We don't care about the security and access to international trade routes. We don't really care about our relations with the rest of the world. We don't really have any involvement in other nations. We don't have any kind of interpersonal connections with anybody else. I mean, we do in that we are a diaspora of the rest of the world, but because it's all separated by, like, we don't have any, like, we're not like, say, Britain and Australia, which share a heavy ethnic component. We have like 1 billion different ethnicities amongst everybody else. So if there's a war somewhere in Africa, well, yeah, certain of our people are going to get excited about it, but it's never going to be a quorum of the population. Under Canada's current outlook and I'm not saying I agree with this. I'm arguing this for the sake of devil's advocacy. Under Canada's foreign policy from, say, 1960 to 2020, I'm going to say 2030, we don't need an army. Just get rid of the whole goddamn thing. And no one would notice.
Well, sure.
I mean, there would be a bit of a diplomatic frou-for-all, but there would be no price to be paid. Canada wouldn't suffer any consequences. We just say to NATO, okay, tell you what, we're just going to give you guys money.
I'll admit to you that a lot of this is hard for me to conceive of, one, because I've been part of it, right?
Yeah.
So in that respect, it's kind of, well, I feel it's kind of a stupid question because we're not getting rid of the army. Right?
And I know Patty and I had a small discussion about this before. Like, why would we just maybe sign some kind of cooperative defense agreement with the Americans, where if you want to join the army and you're Canadian, you just go join the American army. Just go join the American army.
That's not why I joined the army.
You're right. We would be completely, like, are you a sovereign nation or are you a protectorate at that point? Right?
Exactly.
But arguably, again, from where we have been since the Pearson Parliament, we don't care about sovereignty. Canada doesn't give a shit.
Yes, we do.
No, we don't.
Absolutely do give a shit about our sovereignty.
We want our social programs. We want our standard of living. We want our regular paychecks every 2 weeks. And we don't give a shit about anything else. Really, we don't.
We do.
Okay, so we talk about our sovereignty when we are a branch plan of the United States in every single way.
We give a shit about more than that, right?
Do we?
We do see ourselves as...
I mean, we do if it doesn't cost anything.
No, we don't, and as you raised quite a bit,
Okay.
we spent a lot of money.
have
We
the
spent
floor.
a lot of money on social programs in other parts of the world, right? We respond to disasters. We
How's that
we
caring about
send
sovereignty?
RCs.
What's that?
How's that caring about sovereignty?
Yes.
That's what I'm saying. We do care about more than just sovereignty.
Oh.
We care more about the things that you just listed, right? And they're not all just domestic things. So I take a bit of an issue. I challenge you on the fact that you're saying we don't care about anything outside of our borders in North America. We do.
I mean, not really.
We care about the third world. We contribute to all sorts of third world
If
programs.
we stopped doing that, do you think it would make headlines?
I don't know.
Because, like, what's the last major earthquake, natural disaster in Syria and Turkey? We didn't do anything. We didn't help in that. Did we?
The last one recently?
I didn't hear about us sending a penny. So
Okay, so
I don't recall any great outcry.
we had 2 teams waiting to go,
Yeah, like dart.
but they don't meet some sort of certification under the International Rescue fucking Authority, global blah de blah, right? So there was some certification they didn't meet, and so therefore they couldn't go. Right?
I don't recall any great outcry or anger in the public sphere saying, "God damn it! Why did they let that readiness slip? Why did our public authorities? Why were they asleep at the switch that our disaster relief teams are now no longer qualified?" Like, I don't recall any backlash.
Okay, but there's two reasons.
And nobody cared.
One is that with Ukraine going on, and China, Taiwan going on,
Possibly, yeah.
right?
Distracted
a lot
people,
of the
perhaps,
news,
yeah.
the only news you're hearing about the earthquakes, the people who were getting pulled out of the rubble 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
Right?
Could be.
All humanitarian stories. Right? The other thing was there are already response teams lined up from all over the world, and they were having trouble themselves getting there. There was so many going, and even that didn't make them.
Okay. So what's the only other major international disaster I'm thinking of?
What?
Prior to that was
I find
Japanese tsunami, maybe, and even then we didn't send anything. Remember that major tsunami that hit the Indian Ocean? It really devastated Thailand.
Yeah, that was in Christmas between Christmas and 2 years new. I watched it. I was in Kuwait when it happened in 2004.
Did we send any great thing to that?
I don't think so.
We did.
What about there's some major Pacific Island volcano eruptions, but
but was that a major disaster?
I don't think it was.
I throw that out as an example, and these are some of the rabbit holes we go down. Right. My point is, Canada sees itself, and it does contribute a significant amount of our tax dollars, which conservatives point out a lot of the time when it suits them, but apparently not right now. We send a lot of our money.
It doesn't ever suit conservatives. Doesn't ever suit conservatives.
To point out that we spend a lot of money on other countries, which we do. We give out a lot of foreign aid in money.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
And this brings me back to one point.
But again, do the people care, or do progressive thought leaders care? If you stop doing that, I don't think it would ever be an election issue.
No.
Or if you just suddenly stopped. If even the progressives themselves stopped talking about it.
Yeah.
I don't think it would even be noticed.
Well, I think that's actually a very excellent thing, right? I think that's excellent because that is not the reason for doing it. I think Canadians do that, and we think that is a good thing to send money to places that don't have it and help them, right? So if the Canadian government is doing that and they're not benefiting or paying a price from doing or not doing it, politically, I don't have a problem with that. I'm just saying. So the reason I'm bringing this up is...
I just think most Canadians are completely apathetic on the foreign aid issue.
I think you're right to a certain extent that, and I have some questions like for the Trudeau government. When the German Chancellor came here last year, and there was a prime opportunity, a prime glaring fucking neon sign lit opportunity to sell Canadian natural gas to Germany because they didn't want to buy Russian natural gas anymore, and they were heading into winter and needed natural gas. And somehow Canada did not come out of that with a major trade agreement with Germany for Canadian natural gas. And I'm like, what the hell is going on?
Well, because the government is ideologically against it.
And also,
the Germans weren't the only ones that come. The Japanese came as well.
I think it would have been...
Japanese what?
The Japanese came looking for a deal
as well.
Yeah.
I think it would have been very, 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 very completely different if Ontario...
Is this a climate change thing?
No, I think it's a regional thing. If Ontario, Quebec, and New Brunswick produced natural gas, we would have signed the deal. The fact that our natural gas resources come out of two provinces which are inherently hostile to the Laurentian order, that's why you don't want to do it. I mean, if you are part of the Liberal power...
fucked up.
They are.
They absolutely are.
100%.
Did you not pay attention when Denny Coderre was stood against the Line 9 reversal?
Yeah.
And it was the Energy East pipeline.
Energy East?
Yeah.
Yep. We don't profit
And he
from
just
it. We don't want it.
no way, not going through Montreal.
Yep.
Not at all.
Yep.
I remember that. And it outraged me, right?
From crow rates to tariff policy going back to Confederation. All of our interest rates in the Great Depression, like everything has been about protecting the economic hegemony of the St. Lawrence Seaway at the expense of the regions.
Okay, how does for the Canadian federal government, right? How does not being able to get GDP out of natural gas sales to Europe or Japan benefit the Laurentian Order? How does it hurt it to get those?
I have a book. I hate it when people do this, but I'm going to do it. There is a book I strongly recommend to you by Ibbotson and Brickell called The Big Shift, where they say the most fundamental change in Canada since the Quiet Revolution took place in, say, the period from about 1990 to about 2010, give or take.
Okay.
Where the locus of Canadian focus and power shifted from Eastern Canada to West. And that prior to 1990, Toronto and Montreal and Halifax were our entry points to the world.
Okay.
And we were oriented towards the Atlantic.
Okay.
Our immigration was primarily European.
Okay.
Our trade networks were primarily European and to the American Eastern Seaboard, or trade flows. That this began to change in the 1990s. First of all, through immigration. The majority of our new immigrants, our new Canadians, do not come from Europe. They come from Asia, from South Asia, East Asia. That means Vancouver is now our face to the world.
Yeah.
That Toronto and Montreal are the hinterland.
Okay.
Are more and more of our GDP, or less and less and less, came from manufacturing in Ontario and Quebec. And more came from business services and resource extraction.
Okay.
Primarily in resource extraction, oil and gas. So BC, Alberta, and Saskatchewan became the drivers of the Canadian economy. BC, through its business services and commerce hub, because it was on the Pacific Rim and was the link to the dynamic economies of, say, the Five Dragons, and Alberta and Saskatchewan for its resource wealth.
Yeah.
And that this has meant a shift in population, though population in Western Canada has been growing far more rapidly than that of Eastern Canada. Okay. The economic clout of the Western provinces, of the three Western provinces, has been growing massively. They point out that it is now mandatory that every prime minister appears at the Calgary Stampede. It was never that case before 2000.
Okay.
They didn't even know where the hell it was. Western Canada is now is the primary economic decision maker within Canada. This is a unacceptable state. This is an unacceptable transition to the old money of the Laurentian Order. That they see themselves becoming the hinterland to a new capital. They used to be the capital, the West was the periphery. This is now starting to change as Canada becomes a Pacific nation. And this is unacceptable to them. And they predicted this, because the book predates the Trudeau Parliament, or Justin Trudeau the Younger. They predict, they say, look for a revanchist political movement coming out of Eastern Canada, whose sole primary purpose will be to retard the ascendancy of the West and preserve the primacy of the East. And when you look at the political and economic decisions within the Liberal Party, number one, it's definitely woke. That's for sure. Like, economics takes a definite second place to woke ideology. But in their economic decisions, things like what you pointed out, no, we are not going to sign a natural gas deal, because that only shifts more of the economic clout away from where it used to be. All of our major institutions, financial, cultural, educational, are all concentrated in that golden horseshoe. All of our movers and shakers in the societal elite are concentrated in that part of the country.
I cannot. I don't know. I have to say, since hanging out with you two clowns, I'm like, it's like tin hat contagion around. I'm like, fuck, no, I'm not ready to
Well,
put
then
that
how
one
else?
on right
Okay,
now.
then you
I'm not-
explain to me. You explain to me why he turned down those deals, buddy.
What? I can't.
I
right?
just,
but
see,
I am
I've
not.
given you a coherent explanation, and you don't want it.
I'm not because.
Well, okay,
Because
I can't help you.
I cannot believe, and I get it, and it's bizarre that we're having this conversation around power
Yeah.
because it's usually me. It's
All right,
usually
fair
me
enough, yep.
talking about power and ego, right, as negative concepts,
Yeah.
right, and I still have trouble seeing how their egos can and their perception of their personal power is so important to them.
Not just the perception, the reality.
No, but-
the protection of their personal power.
Well, it depends on your definition of it, because I guess I cannot at this moment fathom any system of measurement in which Canada, like Eastern Canada would benefit as well as Western Canada from natural gas going to Germany.
Sure would.
Plus, diplomatically, we would look good.
The
It
Maritimes
would build up-
absolutely would.
right?
I mean, the driver behind Energy East was New Brunswick.
Yeah.
They were the driver.
The people who didn't want it were the Laurentians, the people in the middle.
Ontario and Quebec.
Well, I mean, because apparently Quebec has a hate on for Alberta, and I don't quite understand why.
I think,
Probably because Albertans have a
Albertans
hate on for Quebec as well.
and Alberta is the primary challenger to the established political and economic order.
You know, I mean, it has been since
you know,
Leduc won, right?
Yeah,
So-
exactly. I mean, Manitoba can't do anything about it. I mean, look at how our industrial policy has always, like going right from 1867, has penalized the Maritimes to ensure that they were a market for the manufactured goods of Ontario and Quebec.
Yeah.
The Maritimes were never, ever allowed
Actually,
to become
now
anything
you
more than
mention
a
it, you know,
dependency.
now, this is where you guys are way ahead of me, because me, I've always just been in. I've always been in broad concepts, politically, socially, just philosophically, right? The stuff like the depth of detail that you guys know is astounding. Because I remember trying to figure out along the way, back in the 80s, when you could only get like Molson, Labatt's, and fucking O'Keefe product in this province.
Yeah.
Right? And then I went out to Kingston. Mm-hmm. I walked into a government liquor store there.
Yeah.
And the selection they had. Mm-hmm. It's like, what the fuck? First Moosehead beer I had
Yeah.
was in Essex,
Yeah.
England.
Really?
Yes.
In the UK. Well, yeah, I remember that because there were so many barriers interprovincially.
Yeah.
I couldn't get, and I was like,
Yeah.
first of all, New Brunswick makes a beer?
I thought it was Newfie.
No, it's. I'm pretty sure. Don't quote me, but I think it's New
I
Brunswick.
don't know.
Right?
Did you like it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's cool.
But I mean, it's like a Canadian Heineken. It's a skunk beer.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But it was better than Molson Golden. Right? But I've never understood. Like, again, maybe that's what we're talking. Maybe this is just Trent being idealistic and naive because he's a fucking lefty. But I've never understood why. Like,
why there are so many interprovincial trade barriers.
Why would
Yeah.
I guess I do look at this from the point of view, like, ultimately this is Canada. What's good for the Canadian economy is good for Ontario. And fuck me if it isn't good for Quebec. Because if Alberta's making money, Quebec's just getting it.
Just vacuuming it
what
up
the
anyway, yeah.
fuck is the problem?
The argument I have heard, I'm not saying I subscribe to it. I don't think it is a valid argument. But the argument I have heard was that because the American dollar is the reserve currency of the international oil trade,
Okay.
the more we trade in oil drives the Canadian dollar higher.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which
And
hurts
that's
the manufacturing.
which hurts the manufacturing
sector.
base.
Always has, yes.
of Ontario and Quebec. Again, I think it's kind of a specious argument. in that, well,
Yeah,
those-
you're just getting the money from
there's-
Alberta anyway.
There's more than and there's more than currency costs that
Yeah.
drive where you choose to buy a product.
Yeah.
The other, I think, what's also a factor is that a very robust oil and gas sector attracts manufacturing. In that, I read some stat a while ago that it was quite remarkable, the percentage of manufacturing in Ontario that was now directed to meet the needs of the Western Canadian oil patch. There was manufacturing, say, like valves, process equipment,
Oh, yeah?
a whole variety of things.
There isn't a thing that happens in this
Yeah.
province that doesn't have to do with
Oh, yeah.
oil and gas. one
But
way or
a
another.
lot of those manufacturers were saying, look, our costs of operation, especially the cost of energy, was so high in Ontario. Our customers are in the
Alberta.
West. So let's relocate so that we are closer to our primary customer base. And so that's got to be a factor. That's got to be a factor. You don't want to see your manufacturing base depart for another province.
All right, well,
Simply because of also a one-trick pony, which is oil and gas.
well, this is where
Turn that off at the top.
Trent does join the populist wagon and go, okay, listen, I'm done with this fucking country. It hasn't functioned since Trudeau.
And you know what? This is my problem with you alt-right conservatives. You know? God damn it.
No, I'm saying draw the line at the Manitoba border.
See, this is why leftists like me
the Lakehead.
can't.
The Lakehead, you
We'll
think?
bring Thunder Bay.
This is why.
Okay, Thunder Bay.
This is
All
why.
right.
This is why progressives like me simply can't.
And we build the railhead at Churchill. And
That's
we just
another
start-
example.
And we just start shipping out
How,
of there.
the subsidies that we have poured into the St. Lawrence Seaway,
Yeah,
yet we allow Churchill to close.
yeah.
When Churchill is ice-free, the difference in ice-free days between the St. Lawrence and Churchill is less than 20. I think it's closer to 12 or 13.
And I'm betting that number's dropping.
Might be, yeah, might be. But like across
you
the
know.
20th century,
Yay, climate change.
across the 20th century,
You could buy a couple icebreakers.
Yeah.
in the summer, it is cheaper to ship to Europe from Churchill.
Well, of course it is, because the planet's kind of smaller up there.
Well, also, we're not going through multiple locks
Yeah.
and chains to go from the Great Lakes. So to ship Western Canadian products to Thunder Bay and then out the Great Lakes is substantially more expensive than if we routed it to Churchill and just went right out in one shot from Hudson's Bay into the ocean. But do we do that?
And guess who owns the Great Lakes steamers? Right? Like all the shipping on the Great
Yeah.
Lakes is owned in Ontario and Quebec.
Yeah.
Oh, it probably has been
Yeah.
for
Yeah, like
I
that's
guess
where
years.
Paul Martin made his
Right out of
fortune,
that.
right?
That's right. Yeah.
Right? That's
Yeah.
Paul Martin.
So, for all you
So-
venture capitalists out there, contact the three of us, DM us, and we've got a plan. And because
Here's-
someone has to do something. in
Here's
Churchill.
something I
Actually,
got for
an,
you.
an acquaintance of ours actually sits on the board of the Churchill
Yeah,
rail
that's
line
right.
development. Yeah.
That's right.
So
Here's an idea for you guys, and I wonder if you've ever read anything about this. You know how Europe has a lot, like they've really developed a lot of their rivers, like the Rhine, the Danube,
yeah, they're major transportation
Dnieper,
corridors. Yeah.
Volga. Yeah, they're major. Like Switzerland is something like the world's leader in marine engines, in manufacturing marine engines. Like
Oh, yeah.
they're one of the, if they're not the top, they're in the top 3.
I would think that would be the Germans because MTU, I think, is the kind of
They're big, but Switzerland's up there.
Yeah.
Not like they're a landlocked country, but because they have access to that river network, they can ship.
yeah.
I know for a fact that a major coker for Fort McMurray that was manufactured in California was shipped to it by sea, where they
Because they brought it down to Mackenzie. right?
they brought it to the Beaufort Sea, transported it to a barge, and then it came down the Mackenzie, and then down the Athabasca, and it was done just to prove, like a proof of concept.
Yeah.
So it's doable. Could you do something like that to connect Edmonton to, like, across the Saskatchewan to get access to Lake Winnipeg and then from there to Hudson's Bay? Like, I know it would take a lot of engineering.
The problem with Saskatchewan rivers is so shallow. Right?
Yeah.
Like there's so many places.
have to
I think
dredge
even
60
even
feet,
like
right?
Winnipeg is quite shallow.
You'd have to dredge it.
Yeah.
But
You-
they dredged the canals in Germany.
No. But we're talking about, like, it's one thing for the Germans and the Dutch and the Belgians and to all dredge their sections of a 3,500 mile river. It's another thing for a country of 35 million people to dredge the same distance by themselves, right? Like, right?
Yeah, it's true. It is
right?
a lot. Much
Like,
longer
I mean, we're
distance.
talking like the river, like, especially if you follow the river, right?
Yeah.
To get to, because it's such a meandering river. It's like 3,600 miles to get to Winnipeg.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah, it is.
to dredge all that, right? Like, it's a lot of money. You know,
You're
unless
gonna-
you start we're straightening, like a
But
straightening
we
project for
used
the North
to ship
Saskatchewan.
everything by paddle steamer on the Saskatchewan
Yeah.
in the 1880s, 1890s.
Yeah, paddle steamers are very shallow draft, so it
Yeah.
could be done. I mean, it's not
So,
like you
yeah.
can't build a shallow draft barge or
it depends
a
on
tugboat, but
what volumes of what you want to ship.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
but it's the North Saskatchewan ain't the Mississippi either, right?
No,
Like,
it's true. But it is still 10 times cheaper
could
to
you-
ship by water than by land.
Yeah,
So
you think so?
yeah,
just because of
I
volume.
mean, a lot of the
like
rail
when I studied logistics, that was the rule of thumb.
a lot of the infrastructure rail infrastructure is already there, right?
Yeah, and
even
rail
up
is
to-
cheaper
even
than
up-
rubber tire. Yeah,
even
rail is
even
definitely
up
cheaper.
to Churchill, even though it's
Yeah.
not used all that much anymore,
No.
right? So I guess my go-to would be rail. Could
Yeah.
you dredge it? But all of a sudden now, politically, legally,
Environmentally,
environmentally,
yeah.
right?
You're gonna find the envirocontracts.
This nation is starting to pay the piper when it comes to its Aboriginal policies. And
Well, I don't
And
know about
so-
pay the piper, but it's certainly undergoing a change.
well, we're having to look
politics.
ourselves in the mirror, right? So I think in that respect, if we're going to try and dredge across 3 provinces, then that's going to involve a lot of that conversation. So,
yeah, I don't think it should.
yeah, just the trying to figure out where you're going to put the dirt,
yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah, I mean, the basic thrust of environmentalism now is prevent all economic activity. That's basically what it
yeah, exactly, yeah. But
doesn't
even
matter what it is, stop it.
even as an example, I worked on the Alberta Clipper pipeline, which goes from Hardisty, Alberta, the big oil terminal in Southern Alberta called Hardisty,
Yeah.
and it goes the pipeline terminates in Chicago.
Yeah.
And so I worked on a portion of the thing called the inhibitor run, where we ran rust inhibitor down the
Yeah.
inside of the pipeline. We pumped
Yeah.
it down. One of the guys I worked at Trican with
Yeah.
me. He and his father, his dad had a farm in Saskatchewan. They allowed that wasn't TCPL, that was Kinder Morgan on that one? I can't remember the name of the pipeline. But anyway, they took all the dirt
Yeah.
on their farm,
Yep.
right? Because I mean, nobody else wanted it.
Yep.
The pipeline company could not find anyone else to get it.
Yep.
So they took all the dirt, and they got paid to take the dirt.
Yep.
And so Trent, the guy, he was telling me like, "Oh yeah, we bought new tractors. We bought new tractors." Like the amount of money, and it wasn't, and because like there was this insane fear that these farmers had that this dirt was contaminated.
Right.
And this was just the dirt dug up to put the pipeline.
put
the pipeline in the ground.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
It was before anything flowed.
no,
yeah.
It was just the dirt, right? So they just took all the dirt on their farm. You know,
Yep.
they're however many thousand acres they have, right? You know, they got
well, fuck.
8 inches more topsoil than everybody else.
Yep.
And they got a couple brand
And
new
I
tractors.
imagine they were able to now level their ground
Yeah.
completely.
Yeah. And they were,
Any
and yeah.
sloughs you got, solve that problem.
Yeah. And they paid, they got paid to
They
take the
got
dirt.
paid to do it.
Yeah. So
Paid to do improvement.
Yeah.
Wow.
Holy fuck.
they made out
yeah,
like
just
bandits,
build-
but the
build
pipeline
Saskatch-
company could not find anybody to take the dirt.
So yeah, if you were to
It's just insane.
dredge.
So here, what do you do with the sand at the bottom and the silt at the bottom of the North Saskatchewan? Where are you going to put that?
Yeah. Like as in,
Build
just the environmental
Saskatchewan a
movement would
ski
make it.
hill.
Yeah. The environmental movement would just make it impossible. And like in our current political landscape,
Yeah.
they'd make it impossible.
No.
I think the gratifying thing is just how I find even amongst the woke, the flashpoints they're losing attention.
What do you mean?
It's like they've moved on to the new thing. Like some of the things like I'm trying to remember, like the last time I heard cultural appropriation, right?
St.
Like
Patrick's
even-
Day.
Well, even but as an issue, nobody's
As
going
a
on
serious,
about it, right?
serious issue.
I think
Well, they've
in a
moved
lot
on.
of ways,
Do you think it's because they've moved on, or do you think
No.
it's because people are now too scared
Probably.
to actually touch anything.
Probably because
from
they'll
another
go back to it in a heartbeat, right? Like you
Yeah,
know,
exactly.
I think
You know-
my impression is they moved. It's not like people have
Nah.
stopped doing things. Like you said, St. Patty's Day just came past.
Yeah.
Right? And
yeah, but Irish
I
people are white,
saw-
so they're gonna have
Yeah,
a culture.
exactly. White people don't count.
I
They
saw
don't count. They don't count. You can culturally appropriate.
Wait till Cinco de Mayo.
Yeah, or like if
think?
if
I don't know.
somebody-
I just
let's say you had a church choir. Let's make it Christians because those guys are easy targets.
fuckers.
A church choir, Catholic church choir. Do they do choirs?
Yes.
Okay, so a Catholic church choir.
That's where the term choir boy comes.
And oh yeah, there you go. Yeah. Okay, and let's say they are doing a concert where they're singing a collection of African folk songs. That would draw more fire than the Anzio beachhead. A whole bunch of
Oh, yeah.
white Catholics, the lowest form of in the woke universe, the lowest form of white there is.
Only if they're all male.
Yes. White cis male
straight male
Catholics,
Catholic
and they
choir.
wanted to sing a collection of Zulu folk songs. They would get roasted. But I think part of the reason why we don't hear about cultural appropriation as much anymore, I'm throwing a dart here, okay? Like I admit, I got no data on this.
No.
But I think it's
I never
if somebody
had any
ever
data.
said, "Hey, you know, like we like to do international things. We like to grow musically. We want to try different styles."
Yeah.
There's some beautiful choral arrangements that come out of sub-equatorial Africa. Ugh, we're not touching that. Forget it. I mean, yeah, it's beautiful music, and it would be fun to sing.
I mean-
but we would get killed if we tried to do that. They'd throw us in jail.
I don't know.
The single worst example, I pulled up the single worst
Yep.
example of musical cultural appropriation.
Oh, here we go.
It'll be on your headphones.
Oh yeah, here we go. Oh yeah. Okay, just so the audience knows what.
But this is going into the mic?
Yeah.
Like,
MVD ensemble. This is Russia, the Red Army Choir.
Yeah. If it ever loads.
What? Yeah, this is the Interior Ministry.
Yep.
I didn't know the Rose Guardia Academic Song and Dance Ensemble existed. What year is this?
This is 4 years ago. This was uploaded.
My goodness.
If I can get it to
gracious.
load, come on.
It's not going to load, buddy. You got
what
nothing.
happened to your Wi-Fi?
We got nothing. Oh, we're on the commercials.
Oh, got an ad.
We're on the commercials.
45,000.
Okay, we're gonna mute it for the studio audience. We're gonna mute the commercials.
Увидеть музыкальная пауза.
Russian, speaking Russian. Lay down sick beats, товарищ. Feel the smooth. Getting groovy.
Spy on me, baby, you are satellite. If you read to see me move through the night.
Oh my God, and he's in uniform.
Yep.
Should be right.
This guy's in dress uniform singing this shit.
Now you fall to seek me cold. I used to wash your rain.
And he's got like the finger point to the audience.
He's a regular Russian Tom Jones.
He is. And the conductor is like, oh yeah, he's just soaking it in.
Sex bomb, you a sex bomb. You can give it to me when I need to.
Oh my God. Oh, they're showing the audience dancing.
Sex bomb, and baby, you can turn me on.
And the army choir is smiling like this is so Soviet.
Now don't get me wrong, and gonna do you no harm.
Wow.
Okay,
Wow.
We don't have to watch this whole thing.
Yeah, I don't know how much of this I can take.
Okay,
Wow.
that was evil.
The humanity.
The
goodness.
worst cultural appropriation ever.
Okay, you know what? I take a lot of that back. Maybe the woke guys are onto something because this is what happened.
There's an argument for it.
And there was,
Yeah, there's an argument.
they did it again at Sochi at the Olympics.
Oh my God. I thought you were going to play, you're right. Look at that. They got a cartoon version of it.
Yeah. on the
Sex
communist
bomb.
channel. I've never even
Oh my god.
Sex Bomb Red Army live in Beirut.
Beirut from 8 years ago. Yeah.
Good God. I thought you were going to play, who's that Finnish rock band with the great big hairdos?
I'm not sure.
And they made fun of the Russians, and they actually did some shit with the Red Army choir. It'll come to me. It'll come to me as we're talking. But anyway, I'll get ready.
I have to say, guys, I think we have digressed
Beyond the boundaries of good taste.
As far as I need to go today.
Well, I mean, that's an argument for Russia's not having.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah, no.
There's
Yeah.
I mean, there's
Yeah,
plenty of
that's-
arguments for Russia not having not a lot of anything. But
Leningrad Cowboys.
Oh yeah.
Leningrad, yeah. Just search and just look, just feast your eyes. Anyway, the Leningrad Cowboys playing "Give It to Me, Baby" or something like that, or
Well, they got all kinds of stuff. They got Kashmir, Sweet Home Alabama.
oh yeah, "Give Me All Your Lovin'." That's the one. "Give Me All Your Lovin'." That's
ZZ Top?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, don't play it. Don't play it. Just search it.
Okay.
We'll
right.
do that one off mic because we don't want to foist that on the people. Then anyway, so yeah, I wonder if cultural appropriation is just kind of lying dormant because nobody
don't
wants to give the woke that kind of target.
I think it's actually, here's my sense of a couple of things. This is probably going to come back and bite me on the ass. But I think to a certain extent, on the one hand, I think wokeism is jumping from issue to issue. So now it's moved on.
I think
So-
it does need a constant outrage focus.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think to the same extent, I think it's becoming possible now to just be able to push back and say, listen, you got to be able to put shit in context, right? You can't just handing everything a pejorative. It's not everything has got a negative attached to it, right? Mm-hmm. And unless you are willing and, importantly, able to have a discussion about that, then you can just take your outrage and go over there with it, right?
It depends whether or not the woke have the ability to inflict their outrage on you. If all they're going to do is just be angry and scream and yell and make angry TikTok videos, nobody cares. But when they can get you fired from your job,
Yeah.
that's when it. And I think that's kind of where woke got to, where they could inflict their outrage.
Yeah, but
on
I think that's starting to become part of the conversation as well.
It is,
right?
yeah,
That
it
this
is,
whole, the reverse, this scorched earth policy they've got that now we're going to inflict
Yep.
stuff on white people, on
Yeah.
men,
Or like
on cis.
to say like a more pertinent example. Ivan Provorov just says, I don't want to wear a pride jersey, and they tried to get him fired from the team. I don't think they did. I don't think they succeeded.
Well, in fact, more players and more teams outright are saying we're not going
joined
to
in
do
on
this.
that. But let's put that in someone who's not famous and not a very good hockey player.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say that a trucking company, or let's go even better. Say a computer services, like a business services company, corporate services company. So okay, we're going to do a Pride celebration day, and everybody is going to wear a Pride shirt. The company's going to give you the Pride shirt, and you're going to wear it today. And some software developer says, no, I don't really want to do that. Okay, he gets fired. Joe Blow guy is going to get fired. Mm-hmm. And that's where kind of the problem with woke is, in that remember we talked about the difference between totalitarian and authoritarian? Mm-hmm. The authoritarian doesn't care, he just wants you to obey. Mm-hmm. The totalitarian, you must bend the knee. Yeah. You must believe. You must sign on.
Yeah.
And that's where woke is. And we are now at that point where they have that ability to inflict.
I think they've had
their
that ability
ideology
for a
on
while.
them.
I mean, it goes
Yeah.
back to that. I mean,
For a few years now, about
the
5-6
first,
years.
at least the first inkling I have it was that again that BC teacher who got who got ousted because, as a social studies teacher, he used the abortion issue in class.
Yeah.
And he stated, and what he was talking about was constitutional law.
Yeah.
And what he said
Like he was just using it as an example of
so
a contentious emotional issue.
So he said, personally, I'm against abortion.
Yeah.
But my opinion does not matter under
Yeah.
the law because the law says abortion is
Legal. Yeah.
legal.
Yeah.
Right? That's all he did.
And that was enough to get him fired.
And some little shit in his class freaked out and told her parents, and her parents freaked out and went to the school, and
Got
then,
him
you know,
fired.
he had to apologize, and now he's out of a job.
Yeah.
That was I think that was 7-8 years ago. That was my first hearing.
That's a very good example of woke power. Like that's
Right.
a woke flex.
So,
Yeah.
but I think we're getting to the point where it's almost like pushing back against McCarthyism. I think to a certain extent, it's burning itself out, and people are kind of going, okay, you know, we're getting a bit tired of this. I think moderate and
I think
reasonable
so.
people.
I think so, yeah.
Jordan Peterson has helped push back
Yeah.
against some of this
But I
stuff.
do think that it is still incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
And it still has a death grip on some very, very important institutions.
It does. But here's my response to what you said about, you know, the software engineering company
Yeah.
that hands out the T-shirts, right?
Yeah.
The woke aren't going to get involved because that guy in that company not wearing the T-shirt is not going to make the news,
Oh yeah, he would.
right?
He would.
And
Because it only takes one individual to put it online and say this company is a bunch of bigoted fucks, and then the woke rage mob targets the company, and the company says, "You know what? I'm sorry, Joe.
Yeah.
You're
So-
an average employee, but I'm not willing to. I don't want all of this bad publicity.
But it's not
for
gonna,
the sake of
it's
your
not
job.
gonna,
You
it's
got to
not
go."
going to get the great big repercussions that
Ivan Provorov got.
exactly, because that's NHL. That's a famous
Yes.
hockey player
Yeah.
for a famous
But
team
they
in a famous
will.
league, right?
I got to disagree with that. I do think they're going to go after Joe at the software company because he's an achievable target. In order to keep this movement, we got to have momentum. We got to provide wins. We got to provide red meat for the troops.
Yeah.
We can't go after a guy like Peterson, like they tried, a guy like Provorov, a guy like Peterson, who is strong enough to resist them. If you're going to create that total grip on society, if you're going to have them, if you're going to create the culture of fear that you need for obedience, you have to go after the low-level guys and you have to crush them, and you got to do it publicly. So I think they are searching for Joe in the software company, and they're more likely to avoid the hockey player.
No,
Because you're not going to win that one. You will win the defenseless everyman.
well, I think they have been winning them up to a point, but now we're seeing that pushback, and now we're seeing more of that pushback.
I don't know.
Right?
I think we're seeing the pushback at the Provorov-Peterson level. We're not seeing it at Joe.
I think
Joe
but I think of the two, I think Peterson is a low-level effect, which I think is good, because ultimately,
You mean like a grassroots effect?
well, just an everyman effect. I think moderates are able through Peterson to say, "Here's a voice of reason." Now, I don't
Yeah.
agree with everything Peterson says, but I
Yeah.
love his approach.
Yep.
And I love his fundamentals.
Yeah.
Right? It's basically, listen, you want to be a reasonable human being, this is how you behave
Yeah.
like a reasonable human being.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's
Okay.
the pushback we need. The NHL bit, I think, and that's where the woke is starting to lose. And that's where it was fighting its battles. And it was winning. Right? But now it's starting to lose those battles because now the players, the teams, it's opening up that discussion. They're
Yeah.
getting the pushback. Going after the small guys is never going to win for them.
Oh, I
I mean, they're
yeah.
going to have the localized win. They're going to have the localized win because some small guy has lost his job. But that's not winning them anything. That's just making one guy's
no.
life miserable.
No,
right?
because
And
word spreads around. Word spreads around. Just like there were a couple of years ago, there were some guys who heckled a BC TV reporter.
yeah,
And now this isn't a really good example because what they said
I know the one you're talking. It was a
vulgar.
sports thing, and
Yeah,
it was vulgar. And I was
vulgar.
just like, you know what?
And they lost their jobs for it. But we do hear about, we have all heard about people who didn't go onto Facebook and say, speaking as an employee of ABC, I'm against this woke initiative. But we have all heard about guys who were fired for what they put on social media. Mm-hmm. And when you put, like, I don't know if you see it on your side of the fence, but we see it on our side of the fence. Where you put a very conservative opinion out on social media, somebody PMs you and says, dude, you should be careful. Because they will come after you. You've seen it. I've seen it.
Hasn't happened to me personally, but
we see it.
Yeah.
We see it on the conservative side of the fence.
Well, I was thinking I had to Google it to figure it out. But like the whole Lindsay Shepherd affair at Wilfrid Laurier, right? Like she showed a clip of Peterson in a class, right?
Yeah.
In
and that was enough.
And said
and that's what I mean. Like,
and she said she didn't agree with it.
Yeah.
Right?
Their control over the cultural, educational, and literary and journalistic institutions is total. Total.
Well, I don't think if it's even.
And I don't like, just because a couple of, like, I hear what you're saying, but I would still say, like, oh man, that's just one tiny step against an entire mountain of woke.
Yeah, but I mean, it's hysteria. We're going through hysteria. It's, again.
Do you think anybody could get away with saying, no, I am not going to read a land claim statement? I'd like to remind everyone that this land was, or that this ceremony is taking place on Treaty 6 land. What if someone said, no, I'm not going to say that? Do you think that guy would be allowed to keep their job?
I mean, it depends what you're talking about, right? So
I don't see how native rights has anything to do with what we're doing here. I'm not going to say that.
If
they'd be fired.
If someone's employer is saying to them, read this statement, right? And there's an expectation from the audience of that presenter that they are going to read that statement, then there's a good chance there's going to be some trouble arising from not reading that statement.
So now do we put that in job descriptions? You are going to be the dispatcher for this trucking company, and you will publicly read statements as directed by the company.
I don't know.
Is that where we're at now? Because it is. I think it is. I think it's where we're at now.
You know what? I think people reading those statements, and I think, like I said, we are going through a reckoning with our history with Aboriginals in this, with the Aboriginal community in this country, and that is part of it, right? But it gets to a point where if everybody's saying it, it becomes meaningless, right? It doesn't need to be said at all times, in all places, at all events.
It's almost like a religious incantation, isn't it?
Yeah, and you know that people are just saying it.
Bend the knee.
I don't
It's
even
not
think
enough
it's
that
bend
you
the knee.
obey, you must believe.
Like I said, it just dilutes it to say it all the time. It's like when we lower the mast for everybody who dies.
What does it mean?
When we fly at half mast?
No. When somebody gives a land, what is it?
A land acknowledgement?
Land acknowledgement. Yeah, what does it
It
mean?
means we're acknowledging that this land used to belong to someone else, and so we kind of took it from them.
So what does that mean? What does it mean to acknowledge that?
It means at least we're acknowledging it.
So does that mean, it's kind of like saying a banana bunch is a bunch of bananas? What does that mean? Like, why do we do it?
It's an important part of truth and reconciliation processes.
I'm asking genuinely. I'm not trying to lead someone into a trap. Mm-hmm. What's the friggin' point? Because, like, I've read, like, Treaty 6, 7, and 8. Mm-hmm. And they are largely the duplicate document. Largely. And there is a paragraph that says clearly and unequivocally that the signatories will cede, surrender, give up any and all claim whatsoever to the lands described herein. Exhaust all sovereignty to that guy. Cut and dried, over and done. So I don't understand, like, when I hear these statements, like, we'd like to acknowledge that this place is taking place on the traditional lands of da-da-da-da-da, it gives me the sense that we are making an admission that those nations still have some sovereignty or authority over that territory.
No, I think,
or at least that they should.
I would say what it is, and again, this is part of the larger conversation broadly.
Yeah.
Is that it's like looking at a contract that was given under duress, or not to paint our Aboriginal peoples as children, but it's saying, okay, here's a legal document we're going to present to you, but you don't speak or read our language, so just take our word for it. It's good
They were
for
translators,
you, right?
They knew what they were signing. They knew what they were signing because each one of them put specific clauses in those treaties.
Everything's being filtered, and again, previous behavior, social behavior, historically needs to be considered in its historical context.
Right.
But I think everyone's looking at it now and kind of going, you know what? The white people were kind of shitty to the Aboriginal people overall, I think is the basic thing. Right? And I think overall there's kind of no denying that statement. Right?
How?
Well, even because white people at the time were kind of racist and did some horrible things.
Like what?
Gave smallpox-laden blankets to
There's
Aboriginal
not
people.
a single shred of evidence anywhere in Canada that actually happened. There is a document from one American commander to the other saying, it'd be nice if we could do that.
Dude.
Yeah, but you're using a myth and
dude.
using it as justification for actual events today.
All right. Let me throw this back at you, right? Because this is what I hear coming from you.
Yeah.
You're going out of your way,
Yeah.
it seems to me,
Yep.
to say that what white people did, what quote-unquote settlers did when they came to Canada was not more shitty than good. And I think that's not a not a tenable
No, that's not what
position.
I'm saying. Right? And it kind of frustrates me to no end that this is the way the left always interprets these things in a binary fashion.
I'm not. But this is my point. I'm trying to say, listen, I'm trying to get
but
context.
you automatically make that assumption. That's what I'm saying, that I'm trying to defend some act of racism. That's immediately where everyone goes.
Hang on for a second, all right? Okay. I'm actually professing the same thing back at you right now.
Okay.
Right now, I'm telling you that I think the whole point about land acknowledgement, based on the treaties that you've read, is going back to a broader acknowledgement of white settler behavior back in the past, which was probably more negative than positive, right? That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
You asked for specific examples from that. I gave you one. Now,
that
the whole point
a
is
myth that isn't real.
Right. So now we've gone down a rabbit hole that I feel was unnecessary, right? Because you've asked me to justify the broad statement. That's why I came back to you. I said, listen.
Okay. But does
you asked a question.
Well, all right.
You
I
said,
guess if we're going to have makeup there's justification, I guess. Okay.
Well, no.
Okay. That's where we're at.
No, but that's why I came back to and this kind of pisses me off.
Right.
All right. This is why I came back to you with the statement that, like, if you want me to come up and justify the statement that I think probably white people were shittier to Aboriginals,
then let me rephrase it.
Okay.
I don't believe that actually happened.
Okay.
But I can't speak for you.
That's cool. And I'm not actually,
because in your mind, to your information, to the best of your information, that is a real event.
I'm accepting the fact that might not be true.
Yeah.
Right? So you have successfully refuted that point.
Okay.
What I'm saying is I don't want to have to keep throwing things at you and going through the exercise of me saying things and you refuting them. Cool. My point is, I think in general we were shittier than we were nice.
Right.
Right?
Okay. I'll go with you on that.
And
to an extent.
And I don't want to pick that. I don't feel I need to pick that apart.
I'm just saying that this is the story of human history. Mm-hmm. And we are trying to apply 21st century morality to 19th century events, which is Monday morning quarterbacking. And that in terms of how human behavior went, when you compare this with every other clash or meeting engagement of civilizations, the the American and British conquest of North America was the most humane and least harmful conquest of a people that has ever occurred in human history.
I think
Compare this to when the Iroquois first encountered the Neutrals or the Hurons. Compare this to when the Zulu encountered the Hottentot.
well, there's no question that other tribes.
Compare this to the Romans' encounter of the Gauls. I mean, yeah, was it shitty? Yeah, absolutely, it was. But when we compare this to the Scots' encounter of the Picts, I mean, we're going on like this was some like singular, unique event in human history. Yeah, it was, for the other reason that it was the most like civilized and humane. Show me one other complete conquest of a people by another that was governed by treaty.
Well, I think actually the counterpoint to that is that it wasn't fully a quote unquote conquest in that regard, right? Because it wasn't a full-on bloodbath. It wasn't slaughter.
No.
It wasn't a genocide.
It was a negotiated.
Not all
exchange.
of it. All right.
No,
now,
not all of it. Not all of it.
if you talk about
Not all of it.
because now we're talking
But
about
it
the
was
Trail of
governed-
Tears.
it
Now
was
we're
still-
talking about Custer. Now we're talking
Yeah,
about
yeah. In the United States, it was absolutely a bloodbath.
Right.
It was a war between peoples, no doubt about it.
Oh, there was a slaughter of civilians.
Oh,
by
totally.
words.
Well, yeah, it was a war between peoples. It was, as the Germans called it, Vernichtungskrieg. It was total war. And it was an obliteration of nations. And that's where it was going. But in the Canadian context, it was governed by treaty. Show me a parallel to that. Like in the Russian conquest of Siberia. Show me a parallel.
No,
Show me one other nation in human history that did it better.
here's where we're at as a society. And when I say we're starting to look at ourselves in the mirror and pay a price, right?
And this is what I mean. Like we're flagellating ourselves. Like, oh, we're such bastards. Oh, we're so terrible for what we did. No, we're not.
Yeah.
We are not. We are a bright shining light on the hill. That we are the first people in human history that said, no, there's a better way of doing this than obliterating, than absolutely annihilating this group of people, of killing them all. There's a better way.
Well, I think there's some soul searching
And we pursued that. And now people are trying to turn that around on us and say, oh, you guys are such pricks for what you did. You're bastards. You're horrible. Your entire nation and political structure is illegitimate, which is the end state. When people say, no, there should be no Canada Day. Or in Australia, we're saying there should be no Australia Day.
Well, no,
because
again,
we are an illegitimate settler nation.
Now, see,
It's like, fuck you.
You're reacting to the reaction. Okay, this is the point we've reached. All right, you're right. People are saying things like there shouldn't be such a thing as Canada.
Yeah.
Right? We're tearing down the statues.
That we
of
are
Johnny
an
McDonald.
illegitimate
Yeah.
political entity because because of the horrible things that we did to the First Nations.
Okay, so that's one end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
All right. At the same time, we have things as recently as our lifetime.
Yeah.
I realized that one of the kids I played with in our neighborhood
Yeah.
was an adopted child.
Yep.
Who was almost, and he was native,
Yep.
and he was almost definitely a 60s scoop kid.
Okay.
Right? We know of, if I'm not mistaken, there were eugenics practiced on Aboriginals.
But not exclusively on Aboriginals.
No. There
And that is essential. You would have a definite point if it was exclusively practiced on one group. But when it was practiced on everybody across the 20s and 30s, as it was, then it's not.
the list goes on again, and that's a
Yeah, and again,
that's a piss poor
Okay.
thing to kind of cherry pick because it's
it
kind of an ugly thing, right? The residential schools
Yes.
now. It's become unacceptable to say a lot of those kids died of disease. Apparently,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
But even the mere fact that there were these schools and
Yes.
kids died of disease is kind of a shitty thing.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, you're right.
I think
I would love to do residential schools as a topic for our podcast. I would love to. Just throwing that out there. Because I think it's worthy of an episode. Because it is such a seminal event now. It is
it's
so important.
Well,
now.
it's an important one. I think it's fair to say that even were it not intentional, the result of the reservation system has had a massively negative impact
no doubt. No doubt about
on
it.
Aboriginal society.
No
right?
doubt about it.
And-
Absolutely.
And
Without
so,
question.
one way or another, that failed.
It did.
So, and we're still feeling the repercussions. In fact,
Yes.
the current prime minister who came rolling in on a white horse of we're going to make sure all of those issues are taken care of, and still hasn't fixed drinking water for Aboriginal reservations.
Yep.
Is it maybe fair to say that our biggest fault is our failure to both sell integration to First Nations and then implementing integration
I would say
poorly,
that.
right? Like,
What?
so
It's a dialogue, right?
I mean,
like they gotta want to integrate too. Maybe did they?
yeah. Well, probably not at the time.
Yeah.
Well, certainly not at the time during the treaties. But even now, I think integration to First Nations people is a dirty word.
This is something that was proposed by Chrétien when he was Minister of Northern and Indian Affairs.
Yeah.
In the first Trudeau 4-year mandate, and they proposed. Like they, got together with First Nations and said, "Hey, let's get rid of the Indian Act altogether. Let's get rid of reservations, all of it." And it was vehemently rejected.
Yeah.
Vehemently.
No, because I think the spirit of the original treaties was to give them independence of culture, independence of, some rights that recognize that
the
these.
spirit of the original treaties assumed assimilation. It assumed two things: that the natives would all be dead within 30, 40 years. That, like the vast majority of them, because European diseases, particularly respiratory infections, were cutting through their populations like a scythe. And our contemporary medicine simply did not understand why. But it was. Many people interpreted it as the judgment of the divine. More informed minds did understand that there was some immunological difference, but they didn't understand what they could do about it. So the measures that were taken were seen as temporary. The second was that the survivors of this immunological change will simply assimilate into broader Canadian society.
Well, I would argue, on that first point, then therefore the treaty was not made in good faith, and that is important.
No, it was made in good faith in that they felt that they had an obligation to the people who were there at the time. Like, these are real people who are there here at the moment. You make a commitment with them. The assumption was that their grandchildren will have assimilated. That their populations are going to be much lower a half century from now. And what is left will have assimilated into our society.
If you're giving them reserved pieces of land and saying, keep up your traditional ways of life, all
They
those
didn't
pieces
say
of
keep
land.
up your traditional ways of life. They didn't say that at all. And this is where the clauses that the First Nations themselves wanted in. The First Nations themselves, at the time, and this is why I reject the argument that, well, they didn't know what they were signing. My argument is they knew full well what they were signing, that their traditional economic sustenance was gone. Particularly in the 6, 7, and 8 treaty context, the buffalo herd, which was the economic engine of the Plains cultures, was gone. It was extirpated. They knew that they could not continue to live as they had before, even if they were given a parcel of land. So they knew that they had to integrate into the new economic form. So they wanted written into the treaties, and different nations approached, this was signatories to the 3 treaties approached this in different ways, as you can see in the subclauses of the treaties, in that they wanted implements. they wanted people who would train them in education or agriculture. All of them stipulated education for their children to some extent. The exact way they wanted it differed between the different signatories. They accented different things, but they all understood that they needed a way to integrate into the British economy. They all understood this at the time because their traditional way of life was no longer sustainable. So they wanted to find, okay, what is the way forward? So it was never said to them, okay, you stay here and practice your traditional way of life. Both sides understood the traditional way of life isn't going to work. Now, the crown didn't care whether or not they continued to speak Siksika or Sutina or Cree. They didn't care. So long as you can speak English, we don't mind. In the same way as we don't care if people in Scotland speak Gaelic, so long as they also speak English, so long as they can still integrate with our economy. We don't care if people in County Cork speak Irish, so long as they also speak English. So that was, very much the approach of it. It was the assumption that they will economically integrate into the broader community, that they would not be a dependency upon the crown. That was the long-term goal. So we're putting motives on them that we're going to extirpate, we're going to annihilate, and no, that's historical revisionism. That's not in the treaties, nor is that anywhere in the journals or private diaries or letters of the crown negotiators for those treaties.
Whoa. Like you said, I think this is a topic unto itself.
It is.
And
It is.
we shouldn't be pulling it apart at this point.
Yeah. Then on that note, shall we adjourn?
That was a digression and a half.
I think I'm thinking that there's at least 3 episodes, shorter episodes, thank God, but there's 3 distinct episodes in this last one. There's the one where we talk about the military.
Yeah.
There's the one where we talk about whatever it was we talked about before we got on this. And I can't remember what it was.
We can just cut it into chunks, right?
And then there's this one.
Yeah.
But yeah.
All right.
Alrighty.
And fucking speak up next time, Steve.
All right.
All right. Talk to you later.
Did you pull up?
Spy told me, baby, you are sad delight. If you read to see me move through the night, ain't gonna fire, should be right. Ain't gonna like the way you fight. Now you fall to seek me cold, I used to wash away my lonely blues. So I can deny I like is your babe, only want to make me fly. Sex bomb, you a sex bomb. You can give it to me when I need to come along. Sex bomb, you my sex bomb. And baby, you can turn me on. Now don't get me wrong, and gonna do you no harm. These bombs will only if you can shoot it far. I'm your main target, come on, help me at night. Love told me holding you tight. Make me explode, although you know the route to go to sex me slow. And yes, I must forget to let it go. To say you are not on mine. Sex bomb, you're a sex bomb. You can give it to me when I need to come along. Sex bomb, you're my sex bomb. And baby, you can turn me on. Sex bomb, you're a sex bomb. You can give it to me when I need to come along. Sex bomb, you're my sex bomb. And baby, you can turn me on.